Okay, thanks for joining. So, for those of you who wondered, I was going to do live streams on Thursday, Friday, but I had some work arrangements come up, so I was unable to do that. But please keep supporting me. Hopefully, with the more support I get, I'll be able to do more of this and work less overtime. But for now, it is what it is. So, today, I have three topics to talk about. One is the coup attempt that we see going on with the impeachment. What's up, WZ? The second is the kind of this idea of the Kurds and these never-ending wars with Trump trying to pull out of Syria, and the third is China. So I'll get to them in that order. First on the impeachment attempt. So what do we have that's new now since I've last talked to you? We now know that not only was the whistleblower, quote-unquote, the hearsayer or the leaker, not only were they actually a registered Democrat who was working with the politician, it turns out they were working directly with Joe Biden. Now we know that they also wrote their complaint with the help of an associate of James Clapper. Anyone who can't nakedly see this for a coup attempt isn't looking at it without blinders on. I mean, it's just that obvious. Again, let's go back to what Chuck Schumer said when he was interviewed in Rachel Maddow. He blatantly admitted that you can't challenge the intel community or they'll find 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you. That's exactly what we're seeing here. This is what people like me had said is the reason I voted for Trump. This isn't a new thing. It's new in that they're becoming more and more desperate and they're going after Trump transparently, but it's not new that they've been controlling our foreign policy and other politics for years. There is a deep state. It sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory, but it's not. This doesn't mean there are shadowy men in rooms smoking cigars. It's more obvious than that. It's unelected bureaucrats that get put in the intel community that are there for 30, 40 years. Presidents go, senators go sometimes. Representatives go, but these people are there almost for half their lifetimes, sometimes more. They're the people that are ultimately making the decision. Everything we talk about foreign policy-wise comes down to what these people say. Everything. Even people that are supposedly allies of Trump against this coup, still, without batting an eye, believes the intel communities when they talk on other things. So, for example, we'll later talk about Trump's policy of pulling out of Syria. Why is that a bad idea? Well, because the intel community says so. Why should we trust the same community that's all but transparently showing us they're engaged in a coup right now against Trump? Now, there are still some holdovers that say, no, that's not true, it can't be. The Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, the head of the CIA, John Brennan, the head of the FBI, James Comey, all virulent anti-Trumpers. If you go back and you read, and I'm going to read from a leftist here in a bit, Matt Taibbi, who used to work at the Rolling Stone, exactly how he's even pointing out and connecting the dots that, look, it was clear from the get-go, before Trump was even elected, that this group of people said, in the intelligence community, we don't want Trump, we're going to do everything in our power to stop him from getting elected, and once he was elected, they decided they were going to go after him full bore. So is it a coincidence that you have Clapper on CNN all the time, talking about how serious Trump's crimes are, while at the same time, one of his associates is helping write the, quote, whistleblower complaint? Is that just a coincidence? Do you think it's a coincidence that it wasn't until Trump announced, almost publicly, that he was going to start investigating Biden in Ukraine, that all of a sudden an associate of Biden's in the intel community, someone who worked with Biden in the Ukraine, blew the whistle and had a problem with that? Think about this. Now, the whistleblower didn't have direct access to the call. All he heard, put yourself in this person's position. You work with Joe Biden. Joe Biden's supposed to be dealing with corruption in the Ukraine. Joe Biden's son is working with a corrupt oligarch. I cannot stress this enough, and I'll go through the whole story again. But remember, the official mainstream media, Democrat narrative, Joe Biden narrative is as follows. Joe Biden was upset that his son's company was not being investigated hard enough by the prosecutor Shokin. So he extorted with a quid pro quo with $1 billion US tax dollars to get that prosecutor fired, in the hopes, I guess, that they got a prosecutor that would look at his son's company. I can't believe that people believed it. I can't believe it. I mean, it goes to the power of how powerful the mainstream media is and how powerful the establishment leftists are of controlling the cultural narrative. That anyone could... Would you believe that about any other politician or any other wealthy person? Oh, they're upset that their son's not being investigated hard enough. So they're going to use their extreme power to make sure their son gets investigated harder. Would anyone believe that? That's the official narrative. That is literally the narrative of the mainstream media, the Democrats, even some never Trump Republicans in the media, academia, the entertainment industry, all of them. That's their narrative right now. So picture you're this quote unquote whistleblower. You're a CIA person. Biden's supposed to be the point man for dealing with corruption in the Ukraine. His son's working with this corrupt oligarch. You know that Biden, now there are reports that Biden personally, and I can't confirm this is true, but there are reports alleging that Biden received $950,000 personally. It's irrelevant. We know his son was receiving up to $80,000 a month on average from this corrupt oligarch and this gas company. At the same time, Biden's there, and he's pushing, giving all sorts of grants and loans to the Ukraine for their gas industry. 3 days after he pushes for these grants and loans for the gas industry, Hunter Biden gets on the board of the biggest gas company in the Ukraine. Then he's receiving all this money. Remember, $80,000 a month. The average Exxon board of directors that's legit is making about $20,000 a month. Biden has no experience in the gas industry, no experience in the Ukraine, Hunter Biden. Yet all of a sudden he's receiving all this money. So here you are, you're this whistleblower in the CIA, and you're working with Biden while this is going on. And you know that Biden pushed to shut down the investigation into his son. Oh well, things like this happen in Washington all the time. All the time. Corrupt kickbacks. How do you think someone like Nancy Pelosi, gets in, they're making $200,000 a year. They've been there 20, 30 years, and they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. How do you think that happens? These sorts of kickbacks are occurring all the time. So you don't really care. All of a sudden, Trump wins. Now it turns out that this might get investigated. So yes, I'm sure, what were the reports? He was visibly shaken. The people that heard the call, or the whistleblower's contact, was visibly shaken. Yeah, I guess I would be too if I stood to have an investigation into me and my former co-workers that could result in us spending years in jail. I guess that would visibly shake you. So now we have a system set up where, look at the comedy of errors that led up to this. So you have this person that worked with Biden. Now he knows Biden's about to be investigated, or she. They get secondhand knowledge. They didn't hear the phone call themselves. They just heard secondhand, hey, Joe Biden might be getting investigated. So they go to Adam Schiff's. We now know they went to Adam Schiff's office. So Schiff lied about that. They go to Schiff's office. Schiff puts him with an attorney that is basically an anti-Trump attorney that's actually encouraging to give monetary benefit to people that leak to hurt Trump. That's the attorneys that have worked with the Bidens and the Clintons before. That's the attorney that Schiff's team puts him in with. We now know that he had the help of someone that was working with James Clapper in the intel agency. James Clapper, who hates Trump, who thinks Trump's guilty of treason and sedition and all this other stuff, thinks he should be impeached, has been saying it for 3 years now. Former head, director of national intelligence. So this person, he goes to Schiff's office. Then the whistleblower, the publicly available form showed that even after all that, this whistleblower wouldn't be able to fall under protection of the whistleblower because he needed first-hand knowledge. So they just changed the rules. They just change them. And the inspector, the intelligence community inspector general, refuses to tell Congress why he changed the rules. Just won't tell them. Just happened to change the rules. Just for this one complaint, changed them. So he's working with Schiff's office, working with someone connected to Clapper, formerly worked with Biden, knows Biden's about to be investigated. The intelligence community changes the rules to allow this. He whistleblows, Schiff lies about it, and the media picks it up uncritically. And they run with this story as if there's no bias, and the person, we can't release the identity of the person. Oh, it would be of danger to their life. This is the same media that tells you every day that ICE agents are Nazis, that Trump's a Nazi and Trump's right. They don't seem to be concerned about those situations. This is the same media that has doxed people, like CNN, that doxed all sorts of people. A woman that they fell for a Russian troll. They doxed someone who put a meme up of Donald Trump body slamming a CNN logo. We saw after the Covington kids were getting death threats, they still went back and tried to find stuff from that school in order to justify their smearing of these Covington kids and their defense of adult racists in attacking those kids. Now all of a sudden they're concerned. Does anyone believe this is real? Does anyone believe this isn't a coup? It doesn't matter. The only thing you have, the only arguments you have against this being a coup are just appeals to authority. It's just a circular logic, circularly, what's the word I'm looking for? They all back each other up. So Chuck Todd thinks it's real, and so's Joe Scarborough, and so's Anderson Cooper, and so's a bunch of people in Hollywood, and so's a bunch of people in academia. They don't talk about it. They don't discuss the facts. They don't discuss how bad everything that I just said looks. They don't care about that. All they care is, well, Chuck Todd says it must be true. Oh, 17 former Watergate officials say that Trump should be impeached? Well, it's a joke. No one deals with the specific arguments. And again, I'll go through the specific case of the Ukraine situation in a moment here. Now, one other thing before I get to the specifics of the case is, look at how the media and the intel community and the establishment Democrats and Republicans are treating this whistleblower versus how they've treated whistleblowers in the past. Now, I'm going to butcher his name, but he's been on Tucker. I saw him on Jimmy Dore's show. His name's Jack Kirikow. Now, Kirikow blew the whistle on things that were going in the intel community that had to do with improper surveillance, I believe, and other things of that nature. He spent, a year in jail, is still fighting bankruptcy, is universally shamed for outing crimes of our government. That's exactly what a whistleblower is supposed to do. You look at Snowden, you look at Bradley Manning. All of these, look at how they were treated. And there's tons of, remember, under Obama went after more whistleblowers than all presidents before him combined. He was harsher on whistleblowers than any president. Remember, he was going to be the most transparent administration ever. How did the media treat those whistleblowers? How did the establishment Democrats and Republicans treat those whistleblowers? Do you remember them saying, oh, it's so important, we have to hide their identity, we need to do everything else, oh, we need to have hearings, we need to make sure that this is heard? I don't recall that. I recall them treating whistleblowers exactly as they always have, like dirt, like garbage, because the intel agencies are corrupt, and they don't care. You want to blow the whistle on them? You want to go through the proper chain? Then you're going to be arrested. Period. That's simple. Yet this whistleblower, all of a sudden, when it comes to a whistleblower that's benefiting the intel community, when it comes to a whistleblower that's going against the politician that stood up to the intel community, all of a sudden, oh, it's such a huge deal, we have to take it seriously. So, it's just, you could tell it's transparent in what they're doing. Again, if you're Jack Kirikow or you're Snowden or you're, Julian Assange or you're Manning, if you're any of these people, you got to be thinking, you got to be kidding me. I actually tried to blow the whistle on what I thought were actual wrongdoings occurring within the intel community. No one took me seriously. I looked at legal problems. But someone who just has secondhand knowledge that wants to be against Trump, yeah, they're deified. Oh, they need all these protections. They're a hero. And there's something else going on with this whistleblower that I just find incredible. And it's very similar to what happened with the Mueller probe. In fact, this whole Ukraine gate situation is the same as the Russia hoax. It's the exact same. But what I'm talking about specifically here is you see all of these guys. Well, maybe there will be another whistleblower and another. And there could be another. We have the transcript of the call. It's that simple. Why do I care what anonymous people in the intel community feel about the call when I could read it myself? And this is a problem that we have in this country and in the world today. Everybody's looking for an appeal to authority. Don't listen to me. Yeah, listen to people to get ideas, but make up your own mind. If your argument is, I believe something because I heard this fat guy on YouTube say it, that's probably not a good argument. If your argument is, well, 16 people in the intel community had a problem with this call, that's not a good argument. We can see the call. You tell me specifically what you have a problem with in the call. Chuck Todd. We're in a constitutional crisis. What would the founding fathers say? The Founding Fathers would have been ashamed 80 years ago at Hoover and the intel community. They wouldn't have stood for it then, let alone let it go on for almost a century, to the point where they control our foreign policy. They control all the people that can be elected. They'll sabotage someone that could be elected that would harm their interest. Telling me about the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers would be ashamed of our media. The fact that the media and these Democrats use the Founding Fathers as somehow some moral high point is one of the most disgusting, absurd things I can imagine. The same group of people that want to bury the Constitution. Remember Clyburn just said there a month ago, I think if we voted on it today, there wouldn't be a lot of Democratic support for the Bill of Rights. Your First Amendment, your right to free speech, your right to your defense, your right to privacy. That's what the Democrats wanted. That's what the establishment wants rid of. But they'll tell you, at the same time they want rid of that, something the Founding Fathers put their lives on the line for, they'll say, oh, the Founding Fathers would be all for this CIA leaker. They'd be all for the intel community and foreign regime change wars. That's what the Founding Fathers would be for. They'd want Trump out of there. So let's go through again. Now, first off, I recommend anyone who hasn't seen it, check out the Glenn Beck video where he goes, it's like an hour, he uses his patented chalkboards to go exactly through what the situation with Ukraine was for 2 years leading up into the election of Donald Trump. Because there's all sorts of connections there that are just unbelievable. Such as Biden, who was the point man for the Ukraine, was actually giving grants and loans to the Ukraine for their gas industry at the exact same time his son was being hired on the largest gas board. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the facts that Glenn Beck went through, because here's the problem. A lot of times when you get into this specific minutia, it confuses people, and it allows people to try to just focus on one area of that that's not really critical to the story, and then dismiss everything you're saying. So what I think is important to focus on are the following things, and I've talked about this before. We know that Joe Biden was the point man for the Ukraine and ending corruption in the Ukraine. We know from Joe Biden's own words that he used a quid pro quo, that he used $1 billion of your tax. Like, let's just start here. Why are we giving $1 billion to the Ukraine anyways? Are there still veterans in our country that can't get health care? Yes. Do we still have homeless people? Yes. Do we still have people that are working hard and still struggling to get by because they haven't really had a wage increase in 20 years? Yes. So why are we giving billions of dollars to countries like the Ukraine? Because the Russia boogeyman again? I'm so sick and tired of this. And this stuff goes unsaid. This stuff just, it's background to the story. But it just shows how terrible and corrupt our system is in the first place. This is why I'm against giving foreign aid to almost any country. Because anytime you do it, what's the word I'm looking for? The ability's there for some sort of corruption to happen. For that aid to go to some corrupt person in whatever country, Zimbabwe or Ukraine, or France, whatever. We give it to some corrupt person there who then gives kickback to the family of the corrupt official in the United States that helped push for that money to be sent there. Meanwhile, me and you, the average taxpayers, we get screwed. Our voice means less and less every year. So that's the first thing. So anytime we're talking about that sum of money going to another country, this should be a discussion anyways. Did you know about this? I didn't. I just know in general that crap's happening all the time. But nonetheless, let's start there. Okay, so we have $1 billion that we know is a quid pro quo and is being extorted. Now, I was told by all the media, by the way, that a quid pro quo, that's it. If we can prove that, that's impeachable. That's corruption, that's a crime. When Joe Biden did it, they don't have a problem. It's not a question with Biden. He admitted it. We know it's true. Ukrainians have admitted it. Biden admitted it. He said the quid was $1 billion will be withheld. The pro was unless you get rid of this prosecutor. Now, I don't have to prove that Hunter Biden's corrupt. I don't have to prove that Joe Biden's corrupt, right? I don't have to prove any of that. Neither does Trump. You just tell me if this should be investigated. Vice president, who's the point man for a country trying to out corruption. His son ends up working for one of the people that he's calling corrupt. He's making $80,000 a month. The vice president then uses $1 billion of your tax dollars to extort that country into firing the prosecutor that was looking into his son's company. I don't care if Hunter Biden's innocent. There is no reason. I have not heard one legitimate reason why that doesn't warrant an investigation. Period. Trump's call, look at what Trump's call, who was just looking into this. We don't have a quid pro quo. It's just they're saying, well, we're inferring that there was a quid pro quo because Trump said, hey, we're helping your country out. Your country's doing well, and hey, can you do me a favor and investigate corruption? And then their president said, yeah, we're doing that. And he said, oh, and by the way, you should look into this Biden situation and the prosecutor that got fired. That's warranted what? That's stopped our news cycle. That's probably going to lead to the impeachment of the president. That's how serious that was taken. And it's not even a blatant quid pro quo. Biden, on the other hand, we have a blatant quid pro quo that blatantly benefited him and his family. Again, even if you're a Joe Biden fan, even if you're Joe Biden himself, how can you not look at that situation and say, yeah, that warrants an investigation? Now, what is it that Trump's accused of doing? Trying to cooperate with an investigation, to get an investigation to look at that. Everybody watching this and everyone I don't care if you're the biggest rabid anti-Trumper and thinks he should have been impeached day one when he got in office. You know for a fact, 100% fact, anyone who's remotely has any shred of integrity, if Donald Trump used $1 billion tax dollars to get a prosecutor from a foreign country fired who was looking into his son's company, there'd be hell to pay. The same media now that's saying, no big deal. The same Democrats, the same establishment Republicans that are saying no big deal would say, that's it. That's blatantly impeachable. He should be in prison. That's what they would be saying. They're saying that for far less. We know that's the case without any other facts whatsoever. We know the bare minimum for what we should be, if we can't as a country agree, regardless of your Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Constitutionalist, if we can't agree that if someone in the executive branch is using $1 billion US tax dollars that results in the firing of the prosecutor looking into their family, if we can't agree that that should be investigated, we don't have a country anymore. If you could lie to yourself so much, like Chuck Todd, like Anderson Cooper, like Rachel Maddow, like Adam Schiff, and all the Democrats and the media, if you could lie to yourself that much that you could convince yourself that there is a scenario in which an executive authority could use $1 billion tax dollars to force the firing of the prosecutor looking into his family, there's no hope for you. That's without any of the other facts that we have. Just that story on face value. Now remember, about a month ago when this story broke, I told you, when I was talking about this online, when I was doing videos, talking to people in real life, there were 2 defenses given of what Joe Biden did. 2. Now, keep in mind, I just want to let you know, I'm skipping the background information. I'm skipping check out that Glenn Beck video, where he goes step by step through exactly what the Obama administration was doing, exactly what Biden was doing, exactly how they're working with prosecutors in the Ukraine to force them to drop investigations that would end up hurting Democratic donors and George Soros connected groups. How they were giving all this money to gas corporations, loans and grants for gas production. By the way, isn't that, who was it, Murphy, I believe, who signed the Green New Deal? He's the one who put it forward in Congress, one of the sponsors, because he wants to end fossil fuel production. He's the one who was the point man for sending all of these. He sent a letter talking about how the Ukraine needs to up their gas production to help their country. All of these people that are environmentalists in the United States, somehow they all knew that giving money to upstart the gas programs and the oil programs in the Ukraine would help their country. Isn't that strange? Oh, and then a bunch of their charities and a bunch of their organizations and politicians ended up getting a bunch of money, coincidentally. Huh. But I'm not even dealing with that. I'm just saying on face value what's going on. So there were 2 defenses of Biden that was given. 1, the investigation into his son was already dropped. That's been blatantly... not only at the time was it obvious to anyone who looked into it, because actually groups like the Anti-Action Center, that was an Obama-funded group that Obama's administration forced the Ukrainians to stop looking at for prosecution. Not only did they admit that the investigation was still going on and went to the NABU, which is another anti-corruption, basically the FBI in the Ukraine, but other organizations were admitting this as well. So that's now we know for a fact, based on testimony from Ukrainians and all sorts of other groups, that was a lie. The investigation was ongoing. Remember, the Democrats' argument here, Joe Biden's defense that's being taken uncritically by the mainstream media and by the Democrats is this. Biden wanted his son investigated harder. So they claim there was no investigation into his son. The prosecutor was so corrupt, he dropped the investigation into Biden's son's company. And so Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion until they fired that prosecutor so a real investigation could happen. That's the official narrative. That's the official story that we're to be told. A politician wanted his son investigated harder. That's what we're supposed to believe. But now we know that's not true. There was an investigation going on. The second thing that they said was, well, a bunch of other people wanted this person fired. The IMF wanted them fired. People in the EU wanted them fired. The Atlantic Council wanted them fired. Go back and check my video out I did in this. Who was the leader of the IMF? Christine Lagarde. She was at George Soros' wedding. The Atlantic Council, who's it funded by? George Soros. All the people in the EU all have connections to Obama and Soros. So a bunch of Obama allies were okay with this. They wanted this person gone. That's not an argument. That's not how we're supposed to use U.S. policy. It's not a defense of why we shouldn't have investigations when $1 billion U.S. tax dollars were used in a quid pro quo to extort a foreign country, period. A bunch of other people wanted it done isn't an excuse. Especially when we find out they're all allies. Again, a bunch of people wanted Biden investigated. Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson and me and maybe Boris Johnson, maybe the president of India and maybe people in the Ukraine. So that's right. That's it. That should mean no problem. What's all this impeachment talk of Trump then? A bunch of people wanted Biden investigated. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not good enough for you? Could the double standard be any more blatant? So with those two defenses, that's it. This is what the Democrat and the media stance is now. As long as the EU thinks it's cool, you can do whatever. You can use a quid pro quo to extort a country, to fire a prosecutor looking into your son. Because the EU wanted that to happen. So it's okay. Now, what they didn't tell you, what that doesn't take into account, what we know now is John Solomon's reporting, which to this day, no one has given a credit. We're on what, 3 weeks now? And no one's given a credible answer to Solomon's latest reporting? All they did was attack his character? That reporting showed, one, that Shokin, who was the fired prosecutor, gave a sworn affidavit that the reason he was fired was because he was still looking into Hunter Biden. Now, yes, I know what the left's argument is. I know what the media's argument is. Yeah, but he's corrupt, so we don't have to listen to him. That is a ridiculous standard. You would never... Imagine if that standard was applied to people talking into Trump. Christopher Steele. There would have never been a Russia investigation. Because we know that the FBI knew that Christopher Steele lied to them. Because he told them, yeah, I'm not talking to the media. But then he went and talked to the media. And the FBI still, 3 times after that, signed off on a FISA warrant of Carter Page based on Steele's... So if we could just say, well, Steele was a liar, so therefore, no investigation needed, he's a liar. We don't have to look at any of the Russia stuff. The difference there was, he was talking about crimes that we had no proof of occurring. Events that we had no proof of occurring. With the situation with which Shokin's saying, we can see that the quid pro quo happened. We know the extortion happened. It's just whether or not it was legitimate. Anytime you're talking about extortion, I think that an investigation should be warranted, particularly when the person who was the victim of the extortion is saying, this was corrupt. Again, put the shoe on the other foot test. If this was Trump, And he gets a prosecutor fired that happened to be looking into him or his son's company. And that prosecutor comes out and says, the reason I was fired was because I was about to because I was investigating Trump's family. Do you think the media would be like, that person's corrupt, though? People said that person was corrupt. Do you think that Feinstein and Schumer and Schiff would say, they're corrupt, so no need to listen to them. Who cares if they're saying Trump fired him for those reasons? Remember, everybody knew James Comey was corrupt. Everybody wanted him fired. The Democrats wanted him fired because him announcing the reopening of the investigation into Hillary. The Republicans wanted him fired because he was terrible all along. Rod Rosenstein wrote a memo suggesting that Comey be fired. So everybody wanted this guy out, thought he was corrupt or inept. Yet still, when Trump fired him finally, we had to have a 2-year investigation and special counsel. But with Biden, no problem. People said he was corrupt. It doesn't matter that that person sworn in an affidavit that they were fired for these reasons, to bury the investigation into Biden's son. Doesn't matter. But fine, maybe. So and here's the problem. When you're dealing with the deep state and their lackeys, the mainstream media, the intel community, the establishment Democrats, and even some never-Trump Republicans, the threshold is always this. You have to 100% prove the crime when it comes to someone in their orbit that did something. But if it's someone outside of their orbit, 1% is all you need. Any appearance of shadiness is proof of guilt. So Hillary can delete subpoenaed evidence, no problem. But Trump talks about not liking Mueller and the witch hunt. Oh, that's obstruction of justice. 3 Democratic senators send a letter that does exactly what they're accusing Trump of doing in May of 2018. No problem. But with Trump, that's impeachable. That's a crime. These same senators that sent the letter are saying what Trump did was a crime. You can't make this up. So any little excuse, it must be so easy to debate on their side. Which I would, by the way, if you know anyone who disagrees with me on the other side, I could be polite. I really can't. I would love to debate them on this. It is an unwinnable position by them for anyone that's objective. But it must be so easy to debate. All you have to do is say, well, okay, tell me your story. Okay, Biden extorted, we got proof, affidavit. Yep, that guy's corrupt. Yep, we don't have to listen to anything. Corrupt. But you have other people. Letsenko said that. Yeah, he's corrupt. Anyone else? Cervic, the interim prosecutor, said that. Yep, he's corrupt. Yep, we don't have to listen to any of that. Now, you want to say, you want to allege the people we believe are corrupt? They're all connected to Soros that said this firing was okay? They're all connected to Obama or Soros? Nah, we don't have to listen to that nonsense. How simple must it be? But fine. You don't want to listen to Shokin? Fine. What else did Solomon report? The defense attorneys for Hunter Biden's company, the day, that Shokin got fired, actually went to the new prosecutor, the interim prosecutor, Severick, and said, hey, we want to talk to you. And they got to personally talk to this interim prosecutor a week later. So six days, I believe, 6 days after Shokin's fired, they're talking to the new interim prosecutor. And what do they tell? The interim prosecutor kept memos. Now, there's no allegation that this interim prosecutor was corrupt. No one said that. This prosecutor kept memos that actually became official documents of the state of Ukraine, the state of Ukraine gave these documents to John Solomon, that says the defense attorneys for Hunter Biden said that Joe Biden was full of crap and was spreading disinformation. They didn't use Joe Biden's name personally, but they said the officials that forced Shokin to be fired spread disinformation. And they said that they knew Shokin actually was actively pursuing an investigation into the company Burisma, and it was actually the UK and officials in Britain that dropped the ball. That might explain why the officials in Britain wanted Shokin fired, right? And then they said, hey, interim prosecutor, we want to introduce you to people at the State Department, Obama's State Department, because we want to deal with this. Why was the State Department actively working with defense attorneys for a company that they claimed were corrupt? Does anyone ask that question? Wasn't the entire argument that we had to withhold $1 billion because this corrupt oligarch, Zlochevsky, and his gas company weren't being properly investigated? And Joe Biden's son? That's what they tell us, right? Yet at the same time, they're working with defense attorneys from that company. Isn't that odd? Huh. What incentive would Joe Biden's son's defense attorneys have to lie to harm Joe Biden? Does this make any sense at all? Why they would do that? Yet no one talks about this. I don't even see... Everybody focuses on Shokin's affidavit, which is good evidence. And it warrants an investigation. But why wouldn't this interim prosecutor's memo warrant an investigation? Again, if this was Trump, he gets a prosecutor fired that's looking into Don Jr. Don Jr.'s defense attorneys then go to the new prosecutor and go, yeah, we know Donald was full of it. That former prosecutor he got fired wasn't corrupt at all. Actually, he was a good man. You don't think that the media and the Democrats would take that seriously? Now again, I don't have to prove Hunter Biden's guilty of anything. He is, but I don't have to prove it. I don't have to prove Joe Biden's guilty. He is. All I have to prove is that there is reason for an investigation. The story on its own that I told you at the beginning. Executive branch official uses $1 billion tax dollars to extort a country to fire a prosecutor that happens to be looking into his son's company. That story alone warrants an investigation. Period. What's up, Alan? That warrants an investigation. But then you throw all this other evidence on top of it. The prosecutor that was fired swore in an affidavit the reason he was fired was to bury the investigation into Joe Biden's son. Joe Biden's son's company's defense attorneys admit that Joe lied, that actually that prosecutor was doing a good job and was actively investigating them. They were working with the same State Department to try to get this case dealt with, that supposedly were saying this company was corrupt, and that's why they withheld the $1 billion. And then add on that other sorts of things. Like we know from, and by the way, you'll see the media do that. They'll quote Lutsenko. There's two people, Lutsenko and Lashenko, that are referenced. Their names sound similar, so don't get confused. But Lutsenko was the prosecutor that took over after the interim prosecutor. What had happened was the case went away from the interim prosecutor and went to the NABU. Now check out my videos on this. Who were the NABU? It was an agency that was set up to be modeled after the FBI. An agency that admitted to working to bury cases at the behest of the Obama State Department into Democratic donors, into Soros-funded groups, into Obama-funded groups. In other words, picture this. The State Department that's working with the same State Department official that's now going to prosecute that everyone's saying, it's terrible that Trump let her go. That same official, she's actively going to these prosecutors saying, you can't investigate these groups. You can't do it. Because they're connected to the Democrats, or they're connected to Obama, or they're connected to Soros. And the NABU, this agency, was more than happy to oblige. The same NABU, by the way, that actually was actively... was actively interfering in the election to help Hillary Clinton. So the people that were interfering were the NABU with this other guy, Lashenko. They were admitting in August of 2016 to be interfering. They released this black ledger into Manafort. They were actively interfering to help Hillary Clinton. Now I'll get to that in a second. So that's the group, the NABU, that gets the case into Hunter Biden. The same group gets the case. We know they were interfering in the election in August of 2016. So after that, this group was interfering to help the Democrats. Then they get the investigation into Hunter Biden. And what happens? Remember, Joe Biden and Christine Lagarde and the Atlantic Council and all these people in the EU and Barack Obama, they thought that it was so bad that this guy Zlochevsky wasn't being prosecuted. The guy that owned Hunter Biden's company, he wasn't being prosecuted. They had to withhold $1 billion until they were assured the corruption had ended. Then we'll send that $1 billion because finally this guy Zlochevsky will get investigated properly. So it goes to the same agency they have a working relationship with, that they've basically steered in investigations previously. No excuses now, right? Finally, the right agency, the ones that are allies with Barack Obama and Joe Biden, Barack Obama and Joe Biden wanted Hunter Biden investigated more. They wanted this company investigated more, right? And so now they got rid of the corrupt prosecutor and they get it to an agency they trust. So surely then the investigation happened, right? And no, it was buried almost immediately. Zlochevsky was allowed to pay a little bit of money, like $1 million for taxes, and the investigation's buried. Does anyone believe that story? Why wouldn't Obama and the EU and Christine Lagarde and the Atlantic Council and Joe Biden be furious? Wait a minute, we just gave you $1 billion because we thought you were finally going to investigate this corruption, and you didn't. Even if they're no longer in office, wouldn't they be saying, hey, going on the cameras, can you believe these people ripped us off for this $1 billion? Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Dano. Exactly. This whistleblower is working with Biden while all this is going on. So, but no, not a peep from Obama or the IMF or the EU or Joe Biden or the Anti-Corruption Action Center that was in the Ukraine that was funded by Soros and Obama. Isn't that weird? All of a sudden it was okay that this investigation was buried. Now ask yourself, what seems more likely? That Joe Biden buried the investigation into his son with $1 billion US tax dollars? Or that he really wanted his son investigated more? And so he nobly used $1 billion to extort this country to try to force them to investigate his son harder. And then, oh shucks, they just refused to do it. They refused to investigate harder. That's the official story. That is quite literally the official story of the media, of the Democrats. How many people know this? How many people in your street know? All they know is this is what the average person knows. One, they're fed up with politics. They don't care. They assume everyone's corrupt. And they're right. Second, all they heard, if they've heard anything about this story is, okay, so Trump talked to someone in Ukraine and tried to get them to have dirt on Biden. Yeah, I guess that sounds kind of shady. They don't know the background. No one batted an eye when Obama was going around the world working with foreign countries to investigate alleged crimes of Donald Trump that would influence not only the 2016 but the 2018 elections. No one said a word. It is within the president's power to do this. He's supposed to be investigating crimes. Now, there's a difference between what Trump and Obama did. Did Trump, so far as we know, did Trump have FISA warrants issued to spy on Biden and people connected to his campaign? Not to our knowledge. Did Trump send spies from the FBI to work with the Biden campaign and get dirt? Not to our knowledge. Is there a special counselor, special prosecutor looking into the Bidens over this? Not to our knowledge. That's all the crap that happened with Trump from Obama. And that's what's coming down the pipe with the IG report and the Huber investigation. But the same Democrats that are so upset that Trump would ask Ukraine to cooperate in an investigation had no problem with what Obama was doing. They had no problem with these Democratic senators sending this letter in May of 2018 to ask for dirt on Trump. Yeah, and that's exactly the point, Dano. So another thing that's came out about this, we knew that there was an active investigation into election interference into 2016. We knew that entailed all countries, including the Ukraine. We also knew that this active investigation was looking into exactly what Joe Biden did. Now, two things. I haven't heard anyone making this point. The closest I've heard is Scott Adams, who you should follow. Scott Adams is really good. He drew the Dilbert cartoons. He's a very effective persuader, and he kind of looks at things at a different angle most of the time. But he talked about this. The people defending Trump are making a mistake. And when they say, well, it was kind of shady that he asked about Biden, but it's not impeachable. No, it's not shady whatsoever. What more should... We're talking about someone who at least is in the top 4 of people who has a chance to be president coming in 2020. And whether or not they used $1 billion US tax dollars inappropriately to extort a country to fire a prosecutor looking into his son. Of course that should be investigated. Secondly, It is election interference. Everybody wants to act like election interference could only be as follows. You tried to get dirt on your opponent from a foreign country. That theoretically could be a type of election interference. Now, I've been arguing from the get-go, depending on how that goes, I don't see a problem with it. It might be shady, but it's not a crime. I don't think it was a crime for Hillary Clinton to reach out to Christopher Steele to try to get dirt on Trump. I don't. I also didn't think it was a crime for Don Jr. to take a meeting in Trump Tower to see if he could have dirt on Hillary. What you do with that dirt, how do we know? Maybe if Don Jr. would have got that dirt and said, wow, evidence of crimes of Hillary, I'm contacting the FBI. That's what Adam Schiff claims he tried to do, right? Remember? When Schiff was trying to get nude photos of Trump from Russians? Remember that? He said, oh, I knew it was a joke, and besides, I would have just told the FBI anyways. Oh, so it's okay for Schiff. Notice that's not talked about in the media, is it? You hear a couple witty people on Twitter mentioning it, but that's about it. So, what are we left with then? That's the only thing that's election interference, supposedly? How about this? Do you remember, follow me for a second here. Do you remember when it was a huge deal? They're still going on about this, by the way. When supposedly Trump might have sought to bury the story of Stormy Daniels to increase his chances of winning the election. Remember this? For those of you who don't know, Stormy Daniels is an extortionist who was paid to not talk about supposedly sleeping with Donald Trump, and then she extorted him and said, I will talk about it unless you give me more money, to which Trump's team did, and then she talked about it anyways. Hey, thanks, Jacobs. What did the Democrats say about that? What did the media say? Did they say, well, that's nothing to do with the election. That's not potential. That wasn't done for potentially helping in the election. No, they said the opposite. That's why it was such a big deal. It could have affected the election. So they thought that was a sort of election interference that was possibly done illegally, even though it wasn't. Because the truth is, you could try to get dirt on, if we're talking about foreign election interference, one way you could do it is trying to get a foreign agency to improperly get dirt on your opponent. That could be election interference. You know what else could be election interference? Trying to get a foreign entity to bury dirt into your side. That's still election interference. Picture that in the summer, late spring to summer of 2016, that it came out that the scandal-free administration, Barack Obama's administration, that Hillary Clinton was part of, that was emblematic of all the Democrat success. Everybody was running on Barack Obama and how great he was. Scandal-free administration. How bad would it have looked if there was an active investigation into Joe Biden's son at the exact same time the Obama administration was giving all this money to the Ukraine and supposedly ending corruption in Ukraine, that Joe Biden's son was receiving millions of dollars from a corrupt oligarch in the Ukraine, and it's being under active investigation. You don't think that would have hurt the Democrats in the 2016 election? Of course it would have. Burying that story would substantially help them. It doesn't matter if Joe Biden was personally running. Clearly he wanted his side, the Democrats, to win. Clearly he hated Donald Trump and the Republicans. And so burying that story by using U.S. tax dollars to extort a country to bury that story is election interference. Period. And a serious crime on top of that. So if we're investigating election interference, that's on the table. Now, we were told by the Democrats that possible election interference from Russia was an act of war. It was the most serious thing. It could have stole the election. Our elections aren't safe. Oh, right? That's what we were told. Remember? No stone unturned. 3-year investigation. On and on and on. News cycle every day. The Russians. They're under every bed. Election interference. Oh my God. How can we be sure that our elections are safe? Yet all of a sudden, when it comes to election interference that could have benefited the Democrats, now it's, not only do we not want to look at it, it's illegal to look at. It's impeachable for Trump to want to look at it. Does this make sense to anyone? Now again, I haven't heard anyone. I heard people bringing up this political argument or article. But I want to show you something. Whoop. No, that's me again. I don't want to show you that. Oh no! Did I lose my subscription? Well, forget it. Anyways, but I was going to show you from August 2016. For some reason, the article's not pulling up. August 2016. We have admissions from the NABU, from a man named Lyshenko, who is a politician in Ukraine. An admission to the Financial Times in August of 2016, months before the 2016 election, that they're actively interfering in the election for Hillary Clinton. Has anyone, have you heard all the people that are that were insistent that election interference was an act of war? It was the biggest deal ever. Have you heard any of them talk about wanting to investigate this? Any? Is it just Russia? So the Ukraine's allowed to meddle. Is that the argument? Of course, that's not. The argument is you're allowed to meddle as long as it's for the establishment and for the Democrats. That's the argument. And everybody knows it. Everybody knows the double standard. You could delete subpoenaed evidence if you're the Democrats. You could lie to the FBI, like Mills, Abedin, and Hillary, if you're the Democrats. You could fail to register as a foreign lobbyist, like the Podesta Group, if you're the Democrats. All of it. You could commit any crime. You could leak to the media classified information, like James Comey. You could lie directly to Congress, like Clapper. Now, if you're not with the establishment, if you're with Trump and you do that, every one of those is a crime that you're charged with. So all of a sudden, election interference isn't a big deal. Trump, in fact, not only is it not a big deal, but Trump trying to investigate it, that's impeachable. That's a crime. Right. Yeah, Alan, you're absolutely right. This is from the same group, CNN, that told us it was illegal for us to read CNN. Now, if you're this whistleblower and all of a sudden you find out that you were involved with Biden and with this election interference, boy, you probably don't want Trump. You probably are visibly shaken that Trump wants to investigate that. August, I can't repeat this enough. August 2016, we have foreign government officials publicly admitting to the mainstream media, we are actively interfering in your election because we don't like the policies of one of your candidates. And the media is silent. Absolute silence. Now, just 3 years later, they're saying, if you want to investigate that, you should be impeached. Again, let's play this game. But the Russia interference is what's most important. I've been saying this ever since the Mueller report came out. Can anyone tell me what the most effective Russian interference into our elections was and into our political system? Does anyone know what it was? If we're actually believing the media, the establishment story, right? There were two things that the Mueller report alleged. One was these Russian trolls, garbage. That story's so stupid. Anyone who couldn't see how far we're falling as a country based on that story, people legitimately believe that $50,000 being used on Facebook and Pokemon Go and Twitter of just mean ads about Trump, mean ads about Hillary, most of which weren't seen until after the election, some of which were like pro-Black Lives Matter, pro-gay rights. They believe that outweighed the $500 billion, I forget the, it's like $5 billion, I think, that was spent on the election. I mean, it was nonsense from the get-go. By the way, why is a Russian meme somehow more effective than a meme in the United States? If untrue memes are the problem, all sides have untrue memes or rude memes. Can anyone answer that? That's another question I never hear answered. Why is foreign interference is somehow taboo and terrible and we need to investigate and leave no stone unturned? But if Google or Facebook themselves want to meddle in the election, that's no problem. When clearly Google and Facebook or our own mainstream media are clearly in the bag for the establishment Democrats and the intel community, and they're far more powerful than a dozen trolls.
But then on top of that, even though Mueller took it seriously, what happened? A judge had to tell Mueller, you have to stop saying that these people were working for the Russian government because you have no proof. Of course, the racist, xenophobic left and the establishment, they assume that anyone who's in Russia... Do you ever notice this collective ideology that comes with identity politics? All black people must vote this way. All Hispanic people must vote this way. All Russians must be working at behest of Vladimir Putin. But we're the racist, right? So some people that happen to be Russians put some funny memes up about Hillary, and that proves Putin stole the election. Well, a judge disagreed. A federal judge told Mueller and Barr that they can no longer claim that because if there is a trial into these trolls, you can't poison the public in a potential jury pool by spreading untruths that you have no evidence for. And they don't have evidence. So, 50% of Russian meddling, as stupid as it was anyways, down the tubes. What was the other? Well, they hacked the DNC. I don't buy it either. Good for Trump for asking about CrowdStrike. Remember, in case you didn't know this, the FBI was never allowed to look at the hacked DNC server. Ever. Wasn't it? Still to this day. We're told it was an attack on our country. It was the most serious thing possible. Oh my goodness, to this day, 3 years later, Russians hacked. Oh, they stole the election. Trump's an illegitimate president. Trump accepted this help. Oh, can you believe it? Can you believe it? The Democrats think that, right? So the FBI said, James Comey admitted this. He went to the Democrats, said, can we see the server? And the Democrats said, no. Why would the Democrats say no? Why would the FBI not be insistent on saying, yes, we are going to look at it? But they didn't. And instead, the Democrats gave it to a company called CrowdStrike. Oh, and that company, they came to the conclusion, they said, yep, it was the Russians. Only problem is, a month later, the same thing happened in the Ukraine. There was a hack. CrowdStrike investigated, said, yep, it was the Russians. And then the Ukrainian government did what non-tin pot dictatorship banana republics do. And they actually investigated it themselves. And you know what they found? Yeah, it turned out CrowdStrike was wrong. Now, who is CrowdStrike? Do they have potential to be biased? One, we know they're being paid for by the DNC. We know for a fact that Hillary and the DNC's plan all along was to try to smear Trump as pro-Putin. So it would significantly benefit them to be able to pin this on Russia. So the company they're paying had every incentive. Boy, it'd be nice if Russia did this, if we found out Russia did this. Am I right, CrowdStrike? Sure. Second, the CFO and founder of CrowdStrike is on the board of the Atlantic Council, a George Soros group. How's Soros feel about Russia? Oh, that's right, he hates them too. He's involved in all sorts of Russian activities in the Ukraine and other places. Anti-Russian activities. The fact that every American, we were fed this line of garbage about this Russia hoax for 3 years, and the one piece of physical evidence that one would not only be able to prove what they were saying most, but second, it actually would behoove us to look at the physical server to protect it from this stuff happening again, right? Isn't that the idea? Isn't that one of the reasons you're doing investigations? Not only to find out who did it, but to also find out how to prevent it in the future. So this is the most critical piece of evidence for that, and the FBI wasn't allowed to look at it. That's what we're told, though. That's the story we have to believe. So that's it. That was Russians interfering. That was the two things. The trolls and that. The problem is, if we're to believe the establishment, there was a third piece of Russian interference. They just don't talk about it. And it was by far the most effective piece of Russian interference. And I can prove it. The official story is that Christopher Steele, when he was sourcing his dossier, had at least 2 Kremlin officials that gave almost the entirety of all of the allegations of crimes that were occurring from Trump's campaign. In other words, Hillary Clinton's team and the DNC pay this company that then pays a foreign spy, Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele goes to Russia, or at least talks to people in Russia. He talks to 2 Kremlin officials, people connected to Putin. And they give him all the dirt about how Trump campaign people are stealing the election with Putin. Now, why was that the most influential? If we believe that that's where Christopher Steele got his information, that's Mueller's belief, that's the establishment Democrats' belief, right? How do I know that it's the most effectual? Because to this day, we're talking about the allegations in it. We had a 3-year investigation. Polls show up that 50% of Democrats still believe that Trump's a Russian stooge. Eric Swalwell still believes it. Adam Schiff still believes it. To this day, if that's true, if the Mueller's accurate, and this came from Russia, that Kremlin dirt, that interference in our election, is still impacting our system 3 years later. You couldn't ask, if this was really from Putin, you couldn't ask for better propaganda, a better influence. It's driving the country apart. 10 to 20% of the country thinks that Trump's a Russian stooge because of this. Isn't that what they said? Well, yes, maybe Russia was trying to help Trump, but their number one goal was to just cause division in the United States. Can you think of a better example of what caused it? And so surely, we have an independent investigator, independent counsel that's looking at this for 2 years. Russian interference. Surely he had a lot to say about this, right? So I'll give you a second. Go ahead, thumb through your Mueller report and see what he says about this. Oh, you would like a page number, perhaps? A section, a page number? Unfortunately, he didn't have the time to look into that Russian interference. Russian interference that hurt Trump and helped the Democrats and helped the intel agency. Isn't that a coincidence? Again, the most effective interference, we just didn't get around. We didn't have time to look at it. Does anyone believe this crap? How wouldn't that be one of the first things on Mueller's agenda? As soon as he found out, wow, we couldn't verify any of this. And who did it come from? Kremlin officials? The FBI used this to wiretap people? Yeah, we're going to look into this. But no, Mueller couldn't be bothered. He didn't even know who Glenn Simpson was from Fusion GPS. Huh? What? I was, what page number again? So Ukrainian interference helped Democrats? No interest. It's a crime if you want to investigate. Russian interference that ended up helping the intel community and the Democrats? No interest in investigating. Starting to see a pattern? I mean, it's insanity. Yeah, not in his purview. Read his purview again. What was it? Investigating election interference and whether or not there was collusion with Trump's team. Yeah, I mean, Dano, you're right. There's all sorts of things. I think it was Cheryl Mills was allowed to sit in with Hillary. Cheryl Mills, who was a target of the investigation as well. How many times do you investigate someone while another suspect of a crime or target of an investigation is allowed to sit in with them? Not to mention that we know that the FBI record said that they thought it defined credulity, that Hillary thought the C on the top of the documents meant alphabetical order instead of confidential or classified. In other words, they thought she lied. We know that. We know that originally Comey had wrote down that she was grossly negligent, but that met the criminal statutes. And so then him and Peter Strzok sat down and they changed it so it didn't say grossly negligent. We know all of that. Every single instance, every single time. Double standard couldn't be more blatant. Go after Trump people as hard as possible. You're not even allowed to look at anyone else, the intel community or the Hillary people. In every single instance. Every single time. Now, real quick, I know I've discussed this before, but you don't hear anyone talking about this anymore, and I don't know why. So I'm going to go back, and I want to read you the letter that was written in May of 2018 from these Democratic senators to the Ukraine to investigate Trump. Whoop! That's no good. Sorry, I'm not the most technologically proficient. Here we go. Now remember, what are the claims against Trump? Real quick, before I get on to this, there's one more thing I wanted to say before I forget. Trump, we now know, when he had this phone call with Ukraine, we know a couple things that we didn't know maybe the last time I was talking about this. The first is, we know for a fact that the decision to withhold Ukrainian aid had actually been done months before. And so that this had nothing to do with it. We now know that the Ukrainians had no idea that there was a withholding of aid. Do you understand that? How could there be pressure if the Ukrainians literally assumed they were getting the aid? How could there be pressure if it was decided months before this phone call that the aid was going to be withheld? And now, hilariously, it just came out this week that what's his name? Zelensky, the new president of the Ukraine, has publicly acknowledged that the investigation into Hunter Biden opened months before the phone call with Trump. So the Ukraine, remember, go back and watch my videos when I was talking about John Solomon's reporting. And John Solomon reported as follows, that it actually wasn't Trump's team that recommended sending Rudy Giuliani. What had happened was, when Zelensky comes in, again, it's important to understand the history of what's going on, right? Ukraine is a corrupt mess, like the U.S. isn't. But anyways, Ukraine's a mess. And it actually parallels the U.S. situation a lot, in that we elected someone who had no political experience and was like a TV star because one of the things he did was promise to end the corruption. It was the same in the Ukraine. Zelensky was basically like their Jon Stewart, except hopefully credible, unlike Jon Stewart. But he was a comedian. He was a television comedian. He didn't even have issues. He just ran on everything's so corrupt, elect me. I'll try to get the corruption out. So he gets elected. He comes in and he's basically... How could you trust anyone? It's the same as Trump, right? How could you? And so he comes in and he's going to try to end all of this corruption. One of the things they're doing is, and even Litsenko, remember I told you earlier, the Democrats will quote people like Litsenko. They quote Litsenko when Litsenko said, I have not seen evidence of, he was the prosecutor that took over for the fired Shokin. He says, I've not seen evidence of Hunter Biden's guilt. They leave off the other part of that where he says, but I did see evidence that he got these payments and I wasn't allowed to look into it. But any good prosecutor would say, I haven't seen evidence of guilt. I know there's evidence out there. I would like to look at it, but I wasn't allowed. Litsenko also, so they'll quote Litsenko in one part of that, but not the other. Litsenko is also the one who says that Obama's State Department told him that he had to drop investigations into people that would hurt the Democrats. Oh, they don't listen to Litsenko then. He's corrupt when he's saying what they don't like, but when he's saying what they like, he's not corrupt. You see how that works? But the investigation actually, Litsenko gets fired. Zelensky brings in a bunch of people that are connected to him, and he starts investigating the corruption that was going on, as he promised, just like Trump promised. Solomon says in the efforts of that, they find two things. One, they find this Hunter Biden, Joe Biden stuff, and they're furious. And wouldn't you picture that you're a president in Ukraine that was elected on ending corruption, and you hear Joe Biden bragging to the Council of Foreign Relations, saying, this country's so weak that I threatened them with $1 billion to fire this prosecutor, and they did. Wouldn't that upset you? So Zelensky's like, all right, I'm going to look into this. So they found evidence that they wanted to show Barr and the United States about Hunter and Joe Biden. Does that prove Hunter and Joe are guilty? No. But they were like, here's some evidence we'd like to show the Americans. What else were they going to give? The second thing. Evidence that people like Lyshenko and people at the NABU, the equivalent of their FBI, actively interfered in the 2016 election to help Hillary Clinton. So they're trying to get the U.S. this evidence. I forget her name now, but the State Department lady that's now going to testify against Trump. Now, I won't find it, but whatever her name is, the name's not important. She refused to give them a visa because they were going to get visas, come to the United States, give the evidence. Nope, wouldn't give them a visa. So then where'd they go? They went to the New York Attorney General's office. You know, that New York AG, the one that's out to get Trump constantly. Do you think the New York AG accepted this evidence? No. So then the Ukrainian government was frustrated. So what'd they do? there was all sorts of talk, because you have to, from their position, they know they're historically corrupt and countries are shady to deal with them. And here comes this unknown, non-political figure. So he doesn't know what Trump's thinking of him. So his administration reaches out to his team reaches out to Trump's team, and they're like, why don't you send Trump's top lawyer to meet with Zelensky's top lawyer so they can hash out exactly what's going on? Okay, that's where the Giuliani thing came up. The Ukrainians reaching out to Trump to give evidence of crimes committed by Americans and election interference committed by Ukrainians. That's it. Ukraine is seeking to give the United States this evidence. Meanwhile, in Trump's end, Trump now has Durham and the IG that's looking into 2016 election interference. But it's hard, they're at an impasse because there's so many deep state people in Trump's administration. They're not going to accept this evidence of guilt of them and the Hillary team. So Giuliani's going to go over. Then that gets leaked out. Then Giuliani doesn't go. Because all sorts of people are complaining. Why would they be complaining? Why would this whistleblower come forward? Because they don't want this investigated. Because they know it makes them look guilty. So the intel community doesn't like it. The Democrats don't like it. The media doesn't like it. Well, Giuliani, what's he doing? That's the context of how this is all brought up. And now we know for a fact that yes, before Trump said word one to the Ukrainians, to the Ukrainian president on this call, they'd already started an investigation. So there is no quid pro quo. We have the transcript. The decision about withholding funds was done far before this conversation. The Ukrainians had no idea that the funds were on the line. They assumed they were getting them. And they had already started an investigation into Joe Biden and election interference. Where is the crime? What is the quid pro quo? But you wouldn't know that, would you? Now, supposedly, again, this is why trying to talk to these people, they're so emotional, right? Chuck Todd's so emotional. We're in a constitutional crisis. What would the founding fathers do? The country as we know it's slipping away. Ask them to talk specifics. What is it exactly? Has anyone cited the law that Trump supposedly broke, the high crime or misdemeanor? Can anyone give me the law? We're near a month in on it. No one can give the law. No one can say anything. Well, we just know it was corrupt, but we don't know exactly what the law was. Okay, then tell me exactly what the behavior it is that's corrupt. I'm so sick and tired of it's only corrupt when Trump does it. You tell me the behavior. What is it exactly that he did? What do they say? This is as close as I can get. Well, even though there wasn't expressly a quid pro quo, it was inferred. Heck, Schiff and Pelosi went even further. They said a quid pro quo wasn't even necessary. Just asking for help in an investigation was corruption. That's what they said. That's what Pelosi and Schiff said. Right? That's what started this whole impeachment inquiry. And so, okay, all I've said from the get-go is, look, do I support Trump? Yes. But if he's guilty of crimes, so be it. He should not be above the law. I said this from day one of the investigations into him. All I ask is for that standard to be applied evenly. So if we're going to nail Manafort for failing to register as a foreign lobbyist, fine. But then you nail the Podesta group as well, which failed to register as a foreign lobbyist with Manafort. Instead, they get to sign retroactive paperwork. If you're going to nail Flynn for lying to the FBI, which he didn't do, but if supposedly he did, and you're going to nail him for that, fine. Then you nail Mills and Abedin for lying to the FBI, which we know they did from Peter Strzok's own released text that said they claimed that they had no knowledge of Hillary's server until after her tenure as Secretary of State. Well, we've seen the emails that show that they've talked about this as far back as 2010 about her server. So that was a lie. But they don't. Everything's a double standard. Constantly. So if you're saying that it is illegal for a president, this is what Schiff and Pelosi have said, it's illegal for a president to ask with help into a potential rival to a foreign country, then Obama, when he did it with the UK, when he accepted Kremlin dirt, he and Australian dirt, he should be held we should have a trial on him. And when the Democrats sent this letter in May of 2018, they too should be held to that standard. So let's read the letter. I'll go through it real quick. It's not long. Whoop. Make sure I'm good here. Shrink my fat head a little further. Okay. Mr. Litsenko, remember him? That was the prosecutor that I was talking about. He was called a good man. A solid guy by Biden. Let's see who wrote this before we start. 3 Democratic senators. Bob Menendez, Dick Durbin, Patrick Leahy. We are writing to express great concern about reports that your office has taken steps to impede cooperation. Isn't it funny how they say that? The U.S. has ongoing investigations into Joe Biden, into election interference from Ukraine. They would like cooperation as per the treaty that we signed with Ukraine in investigating that. But somehow it's a crime for Trump to say it, but not here. But anyways, we're writing to express concerns about taking steps to impede cooperation with the investigation of Mueller. As strong advocates for a robust and close relationship with Ukraine, we believe that our cooperation should extend to such legal matters, regardless of politics. Ours is a relationship built on a foundation of respect for the rule of law and accountable democratic institutions. In 4 short years, Ukraine has made significant progress in building these institutions, despite ongoing military, economic, and political pressure from Moscow. We have supported that capacity building process and are disappointed that some in Kiev appear to have cast aside these principles in order to avoid the ire of Trump. If these reports are true, we strongly encourage you to reverse course and halt any efforts to impede cooperation with this important investigation. How isn't this exactly what they accuse Trump of? They say, our relationship's really good, you've come a long way, your institutions are doing great, we help support those institutions. However, we strongly suggest you change course and give us dirt on Trump.
What can I do for you?
Whoop. Go away, Siri. That's exactly what they accused Trump of, right? They said, well, Trump didn't specifically do a quid pro quo, but he said, hey, your country's been doing really well. Can you do us a favor? Can you give us information about possible election interference in 2016? And Zelensky said, sure.
I didn't quite catch that. Could you please repeat it?
Ugh. Sometimes. There we go. But it wasn't a specific quid pro quo. It was just that he alluded to it. That's exactly what we see here. What are they seeking? Dirt on Trump. To cooperate with an investigation. What was Trump seeking? Investigation, evidence on an investigation into election interference. Same thing. Apple to apple comparison. They threaten them. They say, if these reports are true, we strongly encourage you to reverse course. Did Trump say anything like that? He just said, hey, can I have a favor? Would you give us this evidence? Absolutely, says Zelensky. He didn't have a threatening tone like this. Now, why was this acceptable? And then they go on the rest of the letter. On May 2nd, New York Times reported your office effectively froze 4 cases into Ukraine, thereby eliminating scope for cooperation with Mueller. The article notes your office considered these cases as too politically sensitive. That's it. Are you starting to see my frustration here? Now, let's just see, and I did a whole video on this. Let's see how, I don't know, CNN treats this, right? Have you heard Schiff talk about this? They just say, oh, no, this was fine for these 3 senators. Can someone explain to me what the difference is between what Trump supposedly did and what these 3 senators did? Why isn't there impeachment investigations into these senators or criminal investigations? Let's see what CNN says. Fact check. Trump falsely claims Democrats' letter made threat to Ukraine. Under fire for asking President Zelensky to investigate opponent Joe Biden, Trump argued Wednesday in a press conference Democratic senators were actually guilty. Trump spoke of a letter that 3 Democratic senators wrote in 2018 to Ukraine's prosecutor general, claiming in the letter they implied their support for U.S. assistance to Ukraine was at stake if they didn't do the right thing and they wouldn't get assistance. Doesn't that sound familiar? Yes, Trump's absolutely right. That's exactly, this whole CNN article, let's just keep changing the words around. In a conversation with Zelensky, the Democrats claimed that Trump implied that cooperation was at stake if they didn't do the right thing. They wouldn't get assistance. Isn't that exactly what the Democrats are saying? Isn't that exactly what Schiff's saying and the media's saying? So on one hand, when Trump says that about the Democrat letter, they say, oh, that's false. But then they take that exact same logic and say it about Trump. I'm going to skip this part. It's not important right now. Later in the press conference, Trump said, I just told you about senators that threaten him with votes and no money coming into the Ukraine if they do things. That's really what people were trying to say that I did. The only difference is I didn't do it. There was no quid pro quo. But there was with Biden and there was with these senators. And they threatened, they said, you do this, you do that, we're not going to give you the votes. That's the real deal. Trump's just looking at this letter through the same lens that the Democrats and the intel community and the media are looking at his conversation with Zelensky. Now, full disclosure, I do not think that this letter from these three senators was a crime, or they should be impeached for it. They have every right to ask the Ukraine for evidence of crimes that Trump was committing. It was on board, but so does Trump have that right. If you think one's guilty, then you have to think both are guilty. We fact-checked Trump's claims about Biden and Ukraine here. Let's start with the letter. A request, not a threat. This is unbelievable. The same CNN that says Trump threatened, it was a quid pro quo. This letter was a request, not a threat. The 2018 letters from Leahy, Durbin, and Menendez did not include any threat at all about U.S. assistance to the Ukraine or anything else. It didn't even mention U.S. assistance. Let me just change that again. The 2019 call from Trump to Zelensky did not include any threat at all about U.S. assistance to Ukraine or anything else. It didn't even mention U.S. assistance. Do you see the double standard here? I mean, I can't believe that I can believe it. But things are so corrupt that no one's out there calling these people out like this. I had to listen to Jake Tapper and Anderson Cooper and all the other shills on CNN act like, I can't believe how corrupt this is. I just can't believe what Trump did. And this is well, when our side did it, it was no problem. Rather, it expressed concerns about a New York Times article that said Ukraine had, with the aim of avoiding Trump's anger, stopped cooperating with the Mueller investigation and frozen investigations to Ukraine-related activities. It urged Ukraine to reverse course. It's difficult to conclusively fact-check Trump's claim that the Democrats' letter implied that assistance to the Ukraine was at stake. Different people read between the lines differently. You can't make this up. That's exactly what they're doing with Trump's phone call. And they go on, but the plain language of the senator's letter does not appear to even hint at withdrawing aid to Ukraine, and the senators say they were not doing so. Let's change again. It's difficult to conclusively fact-check the Democrat and media claim that Trump's conversation implied that assistance to the Ukraine was at stake. Different people read between the lines differently. But the plain language of Trump's phone call does not appear to even hint at withdrawing aid to the Ukraine. And Trump said he was not doing so. It's just unbelievable. Let's just go on real quick. The senator's letter was written in response to a New York Times report the Ukrainian prosecutor general was considering not cooperating with the Mueller probe out of concern Trump would cut off aid as punishment. The senator's letter in no way calls for the conditioning of U.S. security. The letter was written while Poroshenko was president of Ukraine. Senators were disappointed that some in Kiev appeared to cast aside principles of their shared relationship. Urging an investigation. Trump was not the only prominent Republican to wrongly describe the letter. You see that? They just claim it's false. They say, well, different people could read again between the lines differently. But you're wrong. Now, when we do the exact same thing, looking at Trump and read between the lines, we're right. Do you see the difference? In a tweet earlier on Wednesday, Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel said in 2018, Democratic senators wrote a letter to Ukraine urging them to investigate Trump. On Thursday morning, Trump retweeted a tweet from his son, Donald Trump Jr., that amplified another Twitter user's claim about the Democratic letter asked to investigate Trump. Facts first. The letter did not call for any investigating of Trump. Again, the senators urged the prosecutor to not stop existing investigations and to not stop cooperating with Mueller because they were worried about Trump's reaction. There's an ongoing investigation from Huber and from the Inspector General. into election interference. So Trump also was just asking for cooperation about an ongoing investigation. Hear anyone talking about this anymore? It was talked about. The news cycle goes so fast, and this is what I'm talking about. We allow the Democrats and the establishment and the deep state and the intel community, they control the conversation so much. There aren't people out there that are focusing on the good points that we have. Instead, you're always playing defense. That's a huge mistake. Every single conversation that talks about impeachment, every single Republican, Giuliani, and all them out there, they should be talking about this letter. They should be talking about that Financial Times argument that showed that there was election interference admitted by the Ukrainians in 2016 election. They should be talking about how I started off with the Biden thing. Before they mention word one about Trump. The media, our public institutions are so dominated by the establishment left. They so control the conversation that we're always on the back foot. Most people tune them out. The average person, though, all they know is a little residual. It's everywhere. Man, I'm tired of the news. It's just crap. It's just a lie. Trust in the mainstream media is what, 7% or something? Same with trust in Congress. They're all-time lows. Much lower than Trump's numbers, if you even believe them. You know what? I'm tired of this. I'm going to turn on the late-night comedy show. Oh, there it is again. Trump's evil. Trump's the worst. Blah, 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 blah. Stephen Colbert or Conan O'Brien. Jimmy Kimmel. Seth Meyers. All of them the exact same. Huh, isn't that weird? You know what? I'm just going to put a movie on. Oh, all those actors and actresses all feel the same way. And the movies are now driven to social justice crap. No, I disagree, Jacobs. Writing in official capacity as a senator is no different than Trump speaking as an official capacity as a president. They don't have any more protection that Trump has. The only protection they have is that the mainstream media and the establishment is for them in the intel community. I could write a letter officially as a senator that says, hey, Ukraine, I want you to dig up manufactured dirt on Donald Trump. Right? That doesn't make it legal. But, so yeah, you try to watch a movie. Ah, they're all garbage. You know what? Let me just turn on the NBA. Whoops! How about the NFL? It's everywhere. People can't get away from it. The video game industry. Everywhere. They control everything. Well, you know what? I'm just done with entertainment. Let me just go to class. Oh, academia the same way. Holy cow. You know what? I'm just going to go on social media. Whoops! Same thing there. They dominate it to the point where Jacobs, you're saying the Constitution specifically says senators can say whatever they want? I guess I'll look for that tonight. I don't know that I believe that. So you're saying that a senator could stand up and say, I write a letter that says, I would like you to shoot Donald Trump in the head to people and that's okay? I just don't believe it. But I guess I'll read and see. But nonetheless, they're so powerful, they control all of it. And so the average person, you can't get through to them. The average person doesn't hear the real facts behind it. Like, all these polls show, so many people say that 50% of people say that Trump should be impeached and removed. How many people think there should be an investigation into Biden? I've actually seen one poll that showed as high as 60%. Yeah, Jacobs, if you give me I will Google it, but if you Google it while I'm doing this and give me the passage, I'll bring it up here and read it from the Constitution, the article in the section. But anyways, that's how powerful they are. Now, I want to read you something, because again, us that maybe support Trump, and I'm assuming you probably do, or to some degree if you're watching this, maybe incorrectly, but that's fine. It's not just us. There are people on the left that realize how ridiculous this is. Right? So, I want to read you something from Matt Taibbi. Now, Matt Taibbi got big reporting on the 2008 financial crisis. And I actually read both of his books at the time, and I thought they were both good, but he is a stark raving leftist, and he really does hate Trump. But I want you to see what his take is on this, and this is what I've been telling my left-wing friends. In an effort to go after Trump, who they hate, they're actually siding with the worst possible people, regardless if you're on the right or the left. You're siding with unelected officials, the permanent deep state that's engaged in a coup. So I want to read through this so you can get an idea of exactly what intelligent people on the left that even hate Trump are thinking. So he says, we're in a permanent coup. Americans might soon wish they just waited to vote their way out of the Trump era. I lived through a few coups. They're insane, random, and terrifying, like watching sports, except your political future depends on it. The kickoff begins when a key official decides to buck the executive. From that moment, the government becomes high-speed head-counting exercise. Who got the power plant, the airport, the police, the Capitol? Who's writing tonight's newscast? When the KGB in 91 tried to reassume control the crumbling Soviet Union, replaced by Gorbachev under arrest and attempting to seize Moscow, logistics rolled. Yeltsin's crew drove into the Russian White House in ordinary cars, beating KGB coup plotters who were trying to reach the seat of government in armored vehicles. A key moment came when one of Yeltsin's men, Alexander Rutskoy, who 2 years later himself would lead a coup, prevailed upon a major in a tank unit to defy KGB orders and turn on the criminals. Now, that part's kind of irrelevant, but it does give you an idea of exactly how terrifying a coup could become. And it can get that and more terrifying, as I'll get to below. But let's see what else he has to say. We've been spared this madness in America. Our head counting ceremony was Election Day. We did it every 4 years. That's all over in the Trump era. On Thursday, news broke that two businessmen, said to have peddled supposedly explosive information about corruption involving Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, were arrested at Dulles Airport on campaign finance violations. Now, for those of you who haven't heard this, this was all over the... Two Ukrainians connected to Giuliani were arrested for campaign finance violations. Giuliani might be under investigation as well. It just so happened these two had what they claimed was evidence of the wrongdoing of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. But we arrested them on campaign finance violations. Isn't that odd? Exactly. The intel community they don't want the information about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden being corrupt. Are you kidding me? But campaign finance violations... He goes on. The two figures are alleged to be bagmen bearing dirt on Democrats, solicited by Trump and his personal lawyer, Giuliani. Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman will be asked to give depositions to impeachment investigators. They're reportedly going to refuse. Their lawyer, John Dowd, also says they will refuse to appear before the House committee investigating Trump. Fruman and Parnas, meanwhile, claim they have real derogatory information about Biden and other politicians. But, quote, the U.S. government has shown little interest in receiving it through official channels. For Americans not familiar with the language of the third world, that's two contrasting denials of political legitimacy. The men who are proxies for Trump and Giuliani in this story are asserting that official channels have been corrupted. The forces backing impeachment, meanwhile, are telling us those same defendants are obstructing a lawful impeachment inquiry. So we have two official stories going on, right? So far, boring. I get it. This is the most exciting article so far. But isn't it weird? Anytime we have people... We had all these Ukrainians that wanted to give dirt to U.S. officials on Biden and on election interference from Ukrainians. We actually had Ukrainian officials admitting it. No, sorry. U.S. intel agencies weren't interested. Not interested, not interested, not interested. Now when some of them come to America with that dirt, they say, you're under arrest. And those people say, why? Campaign finance. And they refuse to look at the actual evidence they have of corruption. Moving on. This latest incident set against impeachment mania and reportedly expanding Russiagate investigation of U.S. Attorney John Durham accelerates our timeline to chaos. We are speeding towards a situation when someone in one of these camps refuses to obey a major decree, arrest order, or court decision, at which point Americans will get to experience the joys of their political futures being decided by phone calls to generals and police chiefs. And he is not wrong. That is exactly what I'm predicting. If Trump is removed from office, you're going to see actual physical violence. You're going to see things like actual martial law. That's going to happen. You're going to see both sides claim that they're legitimate and try to get military personnel on board and law enforcement personnel. That's where we're heading. I knew this before the election into Trump. That's why I voted for Trump, to out this corruption, to drain the swamp. Has he been perfect? No. But we see exactly what I claimed had been going on for years about this deep state and the intel community being corrupt. We see it coming to the forefront now. He continues, my discomfort in the last few years, first with Russiagate and now with Ukrainegate and impeachment, stems from the belief that the people pushing hardest for Trump's early removal are more dangerous than Trump. Many Americans don't see this because they're not used to waking up in a country where you're not sure who the president will be by nightfall. They don't understand that this predicament is worse than having a bad president. Now again, he doesn't like Trump. I happen to. But he understands you can't cheer for a coup. That's infinitely worse. And that's what he sees occurring with Russiagate and with this impeachment business. The Trump presidency is the first to reveal a full-blown schism between the intelligence community and the White House, which is exactly why I voted for Trump. This is exactly why I don't understand why people like Taibbi and Jimmy Dore and Aaron Maté, they understand exactly that this is a coup and they're against it, but still hate Trump so much. Wouldn't you have preferred him to Hillary Clinton? What has Trump done that's so bad for your leftist causes? What he has done, his mere election has outed the corruption more than we could have ever hoped to. Had Hillary been there, the corruption would have expanded and continued unabated without us even talking about it. I mean, sure, the same old people like me would have been screaming about it, but no one would have listened. Now it's out in the open. Senior figures in the CIA, NSA, FBI, and other agencies made an open break from their would-be boss before Trump's inauguration, commencing a public war of leaks that has not stopped. The first big shot was fired in early January 2017 via CNN.com headline. Intel chiefs presented Trump with claims of Russian efforts to compromise him. This tale about the January 7th presentation of former British spy Steele's report to then-President-elect Trump began as follows. Classified documents presented last week to Obama and President-elect Trump included allegations that Russian operatives claimed to have compromising personal and financial information about Trump. Multiple U.S. officials with direct knowledge of the briefings tell CNN. Four intelligence chiefs in the FBI's James Comey, CIA's Brennan, NSA's Rogers, and Director of National Intelligence Clapper presented an incoming president with a politically disastrous piece of information, in this case a piece of a private opposition research report. Among other things, because the news dropped the same time BuzzFeed decided to publish the entire bombshell dossier, reporters spent that week obsessing not about the mode of the story's release, but about the claims. In particular, audience were wrecked by allegations that Russians were trying to blackmail Trump with evidence of a golden shower party commissioned on the bed once slept in by Obama. Twitter exploded. No other news mattered. For the next 2 years, the claims of compromise and continuing Trump-Russia exchange hung over the White House like the sword of Damocles. Few were interested in the motives for making this story public. As it turned out, there were two explanations, one that was made public and one that came out later. The public justification outlined in the CNN piece was to make the president aware of this. However, we know from Comey's 2017 memo, Deputy Andrew McCabe and FBI General Counsel Baker, there was another explanation. Comey wrote, I said I wasn't saying this was true, only I wanted Trump to know both that it had been reported and there were reports in my hands. I said media like CNN had them and were looking for a news hook. I said it was important that we not give them the excuse to write that, and the FBI had the material or redacted that we were keeping it very close hold. Now, let me take a break here for a second, because I know people don't just want to hear me read. Yeah, Alan, I would be willing to go on other channels, absolutely. Hit me up and give me his info. I would love to talk to anyone. But real quick, what he's saying here is the information, the intel agencies opened war right out of the get-go with Trump. And then we know from this January 2017 memo of Comey what went on. And I talked a lot about this when it was going on. So let me go through it real quick. The story is as follows. You had Brennan, who at this point was working for CNN. Brennan publicly was the one who, Comey admits, told him that he should brief Trump on the dossier because it was so serious. Now, tellingly, Comey did not brief Trump on the dossier in regards to all the other allegations of election interference. He only briefed him on the P part of it. So Comey admits in his memo, he knew CNN had this story and he didn't want CNN to be able to have a reason to run the story. Right? Brennan was the one who's working at CNN at this point who tells Comey to do this meeting. As soon as Comey does the meeting, CNN uses the meeting as the hook to run the story. Now, isn't it odd that Brennan, who knew of this meeting? We know Brennan knew, we know Comey knew, we knew Baker knew, so it was some high-up official that told them, likely Brennan himself. His agency's waiting on the hook to run the story. He tells Comey to go ahead and tell Trump about it, and then CNN runs the story. But explain to me why Comey wouldn't be furious about this. Comey, supposedly, he's not partisan, right? He has a higher loyalty. Just read his book. He doesn't want CNN to be able to run this story. In fact, he's warning Trump, don't do anything that could cause CNN to run this story. So then 2 days later, when CNN runs the story and uses Comey's own meeting with Trump as the reason, wouldn't Comey be furious? Wouldn't Comey go, dang, I didn't want that story to run. That's exactly why I talked to Trump. The fact that someone leaked that I talked to Trump to run that story infuriates me. Wouldn't that infuriate him and he would try to get to the bottom of it? But instead, no. Not at all. Imagine if a similar situation had taken place in January of 2009, involving President-elect Barack Obama. Picture a meeting between Obama and the heads of the CIA, NSA, and FBI, along with the DIA, in which a newly elected president is presented with a report compiled by, say, Judicial Watch, accusing him of links to Al-Qaeda. Imagine further that they tell Obama they are presenting him with this information to make him aware of the blackmail threat, to reassure him that they won't give news agencies a hook to publish the news. Now imagine if news came out on Fox days later. Imagine further that within a year, one of the four officials paid became a paid Fox contributor. Democrats would lose their minds. That is absolutely 100% true. There would be calls for investigations. Adam Schiff would have been screaming, how dare you do this to Obama? The media would have been apoplectic, just incredibly furious. Instead, when it's Trump, the media are all with the intel agencies. The country mostly did not lose its mind, however, because the episode did not involve a traditional presidential figure like Obama, nor was it understood to have been directed at the institution of the White House. Instead, it was a story about an infamously corrupt individual, Donald Trump, a pussy-grabbing scammer who bragged about using bankruptcy to escape debt and publicly praised Vladimir Putin. Audience believed the allegations against this person and saw the intelligence community as acting patriotically, doing their best to keep us informed about a still-breaking investigation into a rogue president. I don't think Trump's infamously corrupt, but you get it. This is someone who doesn't like Trump. In other words, he's saying, well, everyone was cool with it because they didn't like Trump. Now, all the Republicans, I didn't like Obama. But I didn't get away with this kind of crap. I didn't want a coup. Yet, we're told that the left's far more ethical than us. We're told that they're morally superior. Yet here we have an admission from a leftist like, dude, if this was happening to someone on the left, you people would have lost your minds. But you're cool with it when it's Trump. But a parallel story was ignored. Leaks from the intelligence community most often pertain to foreign policy. The leak of the January 2017 meeting between the four chiefs and Trump, which without a question damaged both the presidency and America's standing abroad, was an unprecedented act of insubordination. That's right, it was. Has anyone been punished for it? We're told, how long have we been told? Yeah, we're investigating the leakers. Anyone? We got that guy the other day, but it wasn't with this incident. They act with impunity. Until they start to go to jail, nothing will change. It was a bold new foray into domestic politics by intelligence agencies that in recent decades began asserting all sorts of frightening new authority. Yep. They were kidnapping foreigners, assassinating by drone, conducting paramilitary operations without congressional notice, building an international archipelago of secret prisons, and engaging in mass warrantless surveillance of Americans. Yep. And people like Matt Taibbi and the others on the left were with me in criticizing this. I was against the Patriot Act. I'm against all these foreign regime change wars. Now, most of the left, they're for it. They're for the same intelligence agencies that they said were so corrupt. Continuing, we found out in a court case last week just how extensive the illegal domestic surveillance has been, with the FBI engaged in tens of thousands of warrantless searches. Tens of thousands of people, American citizens, with their Bill of Rights protections violated. Involving American emails and phone numbers under the guise of combating foreign subversion. This is the group, the intel agency, that's breaking the law, taking away your rights that the left is cheering for. That's who the CIA whistleblower is. This is the group that's saying you can't investigate their corruption or it's impeachable. And the Democrats and the media are happy to agree. The agency's new trick is inserting themselves in domestic politics using leaks and media pressure. That's right, as I've been saying. The media is just another part of the intel agency. They're just the mouthpiece. They say they hold truth to power, but in reality, they bury truth for the powerful. That's what the media is, 95% of it. The same media that told us after the Iraq War that we were lied into by these same intelligence agencies. They said, our bad. We're sorry. We should have asked harder questions. Never again will we allow ourselves to be lied to like this by the intel agencies. We'll make sure we hold their feet to the fire and get to the bottom of things. Now just what? Less than 2 decades later? Now not only are they not investigating or not being critical of the intel agencies, they're literally just acting as their mouthpiece, helping them engage in a coup and influencing domestic policy, as even this leftist, Matt Taibbi, admits. The Intel Chiefs meeting was just the first in a series of similar stories, many following a pattern in which a document was created, passed from the department to department, and leaked. And here's a bunch of examples. You know them, I don't have to go through them. To be sure, people familiar with the matter leaked a lot of true stories in the last few years, but many were clearly problematic even at the time of release. Moreover, all took place in context of constant, hounding pressure from media figures, congressional allies like Schiff and Swalwell, as well as ex-officials who could make use of their own personal public platforms in addition to being unnamed sources in straight news reports. Politicians working directly with the intel community, working directly with the media, hounding over and over and over nonstop. This is someone who hates Trump admitting this. Where do you think Trump's popularity would be if this wasn't the case? He admits this is unprecedented. No president in history has ever had to go through with this. They used commercial news platforms to argue that Trump had committed treason, needed to be removed from office, and preferably also indicted as soon as possible. A shocking number of these voices were former intelligence officers who joined Clapper in becoming paid news contributors. Op-ed pages and news networks are packed with now ex-spooks, editorializing about stories in which they had personal involvement. Michael Morrell, Michael Hayden, Asher Rangappa, Andrew McCabe, among many others, including especially all 4 of the original intel chiefs. Clapper, Rogers, Comey, and MSNBC headliner John Brennan. The same intel people that we should all be critical of, unelected bureaucrats that spend 30, 40 years in Washington, that Schumer told us that even the most powerful elected leader in the world, the president, has to be fearful of, can't criticize him. Now, they're working directly with the media. They all hate Trump. They're all doing exactly what Schumer said. Russiagate birthed a whole brand of politics, a government in exile, which prosecuted its case against Trump via a constant stream of approved leaks, partisans in Congress, an increasingly unified and thematically consistent set of commercial news outlets. Do you see what they're saying? There is no difference between the establishment Democrats, the intel agencies, and the media. They are all one. They're all engaged in a constant takedown attempt and coup of Trump. A leftist is saying this. These mechanisms have been transplanted now into the Ukraine Gate drama. It's the same people beating the public drums, with the messaging run out of the same congressional committees, through the same Nadlers, Schiffs, and Swalwells. The same news outlets are on full alert. The sideline intel chiefs are once again playing central roles in making the public case. Comey says, we may now be at a point where impeachment is necessary. Brennan, with unintentional irony, says the United States is no longer a democracy. Clapper says the Ukraine whistleblower complaint is one of the most credible he's seen. We know that the Ukraine whistleblower worked with an associate of Clapper's. Do you see how this is all being done over and over again? If Trump wins and doesn't get removed from office, it's going to be the same old crap. As a reporter covering the 2015-16 race, I thought Trump's campaign was disturbing on many levels, but logical as a news story. He succeeded for class reasons, because of flaws in the media gifted him amounts of coverage, because he took cunning advantage of long-simmering frustrations in the electorate. I love it, even how left is, even though I'm agreeing with a lot of Taibbi says here. It's like Trump was a grifter because he actually talked to the people. Oh, what a grifter, pointing out the corruption of the intel agencies and the media. Maybe if someone on the left had been doing that, who's the left? Right? Who's the left going to put up? And like I said, they'll try to scapegoat Biden, and if things ever come, they'll cut off whoever they have to, the Democrats. They don't care. But they'll still claim they're somehow morally superior. Who do they have? Is there anyone running for president as the Democrats that are against this coup? Tulsi Gabbard even came out eventually and said, yeah, I'm for the impeachment. They don't have anyone. Now, if Matt Taibbi could figure it out, and even better, if I could figure out what's going on, you know damn well that Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang and Joe Biden himself and Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris, all of them figured it out. They know it's a coup, and they don't care. They don't speak up about it. If you're not speaking up about it and outraged by it, then you're part of the problem. Unless you're just ignorant of it. Which, yes, the person down the street probably is ignorant of it. But not if you're in the media. Not if you're in Washington like this. He also clearly catered to racist fears. Whatever. And the collapse in trust to institutions like the news media, the Fed, corporations, NATO, and yes, the intelligence services. Isn't it funny? They could be like, oh, he was right about NATO. He was right about the corporations. He was right about the media. He was right about the intelligence. But he was wrong on immigration. That's racist. In enormous numbers, voters rejected everything they'd ever been told about who was to vote and qualified for the higher office. Trump's campaign antagonism towards the military and intelligence world was at best a millimeter thick. Like everything he said as a candidate, it was a gimmick, whatever. He was insincere and full of it, and irresponsible at first, at least, when he attacked the deep state and the fake news media. Doesn't change the reality. So even if you hate Trump, right? I don't agree with what Taibbi's saying here, but the point is, even if you hate Trump, this is what he said. It doesn't change the reality of what's happened since. Even paranoiacs have enemies. And even Donald Deep State Trump is legitimately elected president whose ouster is being actively sought by the intelligence community. Trump stands accused of using the office of the presidency to advance political aims. In particular, pressuring Ukraine to investigate rival Joe Biden. He's guilty, but how guilty in comparison to his accusers? Right, guilty of what, though? Is it a crime? He's guilty in that he did that, but I don't see what the crime is. Trump, and this is the important context. Again, a leftist saying that. Trump, at least insofar as we know, has not used Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act to monitor political rivals. He hasn't deployed human counterintelligence informants to follow the likes of Hunter Biden. He hasn't maneuvered to secure special counsel to probes of the Democrats. That was Obama. That's the left. That was James Comey. That's the intel community that did that. The same media now, the Chuck Todds that are saying, oh my God, the country. Where were they then? They were not only not saying that investigation was damaging to the country, they actively cheered it on. Got leaks, worked with the intel community, spread the lies. And while Donald Trump conducting foreign policy based on what he sees on Fox and Friends is troubling, it's not even in the same ballpark as CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post, and The New York Times engaging in de facto coverage partnerships with the FBI and the CIA to push highly politicized, phony narratives like Russiagate. Lies! What are supposed to be the beacons of our media, they pat themselves on the back. The Standard, The New York Times, The Washington Post, all of these pundits, CNN, MSNBC, liars, all working with the intel community to push lies engaged in a coup to take down Trump. Trump's tin-pot Twitter threats and cancellation of White House privileges for dolts like Jim Acosta also don't begin to compare to the danger posed by Facebook, Google, and Twitter, under pressure from Senate, organizing with groups like the Atlantic Council, funded by George Soros, to fight fake news in the name of preventing the foment of discord. Now, I say this all the time. A lot of these people on the left, I might disagree with Taibbi and what he thinks about Trump. At least he's a man of integrity. Isn't it ironic how similar someone like me on the right and someone like me on the left, and what we're saying is? Dangers of the intel community. Dangers of places like Facebook, Google, Twitter, censoring people. That's why I would recommend that they say, even if they don't like Trump's domestic policies, the big fight is fighting this corruption. Matt Taibbi's never going to see a president he likes that's willing to fight this corruption as long as they exist. So the best chance we have of ending it is to support Trump. He finishes here. I don't believe most Americans have thought through what a successful campaign to oust Trump will look like. Most casual news consumers can only think of it in terms of Mike Pence becoming president. The real problem would be the precedent of de facto intelligence community veto over elections. Which is what I've been saying. That's the way it's always been. This would just embolden them. If they get away with it out in the open publicly like this, that's the end of the game. Your vote no longer matters. What's your issue? Climate change? Second Amendment? Pro-life? Pro-choice? None of it matters. You will get to pick from pre-approved people from the intel community. You better hope they agree with you on some of these issues. But I'll tell you issues they're not going to agree with you on. Foreign regime change wars, bailing out bankers, helping their rich oligarch friends get even more rich, having open borders and globalism so that their power increases and that their corporate friends' power increases. They don't care about you, the average person. Using the lunatic spook world brand of politics has dominated the last 3 years. CIA, FBI-backed impeachment could also be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If Trump thinks he's going to be jailed, he'll sooner or later figure out his only real move is to start acting like the dictator MSNBC and CNN insist he is. Why give up the White House and wait to be arrested when he still has theoretical authority to send special forces troops rappelling through the windows of every last Russiagate, Ukrainegate leaker? That would be the end game in a third world country, and it's where we're headed. Welcome to the permanent power struggle. So I wanted to read that to you because I think it's important to show it's not just people on the right. Check out Jimmy Dore. Check out Aaron Mattei. Even Glenn Greenwald some at The Intercept. Though many of The Intercept people hated Greenwald for being against Russiagate. Yeah, I'll put my email address. And sorry if people are typing to me, it's tough when I'm reading. But that's where we're at. Even people on the left can see that this is a coup. You don't have to like Trump. You don't have to like... I don't like a lot... Like, I don't mind his brashness, but like when he's attacking Rosie O'Donnell or Arnold Schwarzenegger because The Apprentice wasn't as good under him, it's like, whatever. I don't need that. You know? No, where was the section? I'll read it. Yeah, I'll read it later. I don't... But that's where we're at. Oops. 1 second here. Okay. So that's where we're at in the Ukrainegate. I would like to, I'm going to move on from it, but it is, along with the Russiagate situation, it is the biggest political scandal in the history of our time. Okay, here's that section. The senators and representatives shall receive compensation for their services to be ascertained by law and paid out to the Treasury of the United States. They shall, in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses, and in going to and returning from the same, and for any speech or debate in the House. They shall not be questioned in any other place. So basically, it's saying, except for treason, felony. Right. So they can get away with misdemeanors, but it specifically says not a felony. So you couldn't tell someone to shoot someone in the face. And I don't know if that applies to exactly what they're writing with their letters. And it certainly wouldn't apply to any assistants or staff that they had write this letter. And again, we haven't even heard the specific crime that Trump's been accused of to impeach him of. So whatever that crime would be, they say you don't need a crime necessarily. So why couldn't the senators be impeached or removed from office for the same thing? So, but I'm going to move on real quick. I probably only have a half hour more maybe. But I wanted to talk real quick about the withdrawals from Syria. And one of the things that... It's a complicated situation, I get that, right? The situation has to do with this. The idea that you don't want to strand our allies that have helped us overseas. And that's going to be where all these Republicans and Democrats come down on Trump because, if we pull out, it'll hurt the Kurds. I'm going to be honest here, and I don't know specifically as to how much of an ally the Kurds were. I know that we armed them to fight ISIS, and in a sense, they're allies. But in that sense, so's Russia, and so's Assad. Would we call them allies? They also fought ISIS. But there's a group over there with the Kurds called the PKK that has trained Antifa, which certainly is a domestic terrorist organization, and things like that. Here's the angle I want to approach this. I come at from the angle of I am for bringing troops home, and I think that we're in all sorts of places that we shouldn't be. And I think that it's a terrible thing that we are always finding an excuse that we have to stay in all of these foreign wars over and over and over again. And I don't believe it. I think that they're liars. I think that they're a deep state, again, these intel officials that'll do anything to keep these wars going for several reasons. One, because it's profitable to the military-industrial complex. Second, because it allows things like kickbacks and things like we see with the Joe and Hunter Biden situation. It advances their goals. They want us in a state of never-ending perpetual war. And so I always default to, yes, bring the troops back. Unless I can specifically be given clear reasons as to why troops need to go or remain somewhere. And this nebulous, for the Kurds, I'm not buying it. So let me tell you some reasons why and I fully admit, I'm willing to listen to someone talk to me more that knows more about the specific situation of the Kurds and as to why we need to stay there. But here's my reading of the situation so far. The Kurds are alleged to be attacked by Turkey. Turkey is our NATO ally. We actually have nuclear weapons stationed in Turkey. We give them military support and economic support to Turkey, our ally, supposedly. Now, I remember a time not so long ago when Trump criticized NATO, which I'm for pulling out of NATO. I think it is an archaic institution that was designed to defend against Russia and now exists as a provocation towards Russia, and it accomplishes nothing good except suck U.S. dollars, tax dollars, to go to corrupt oligarchs in these other countries. That's what I feel about NATO. It is an agency, it is an alliance without an agenda. What does NATO do? Yet Turkey's in it. But I remember when Trump criticized NATO and, oh my God, Republicans and Democrats said, how can you criticize NATO? Those are our allies. We have to have their back. Now keep in mind, the treaty we have signed with NATO says that if one member is attacked, all members are obligated to defend that member. That's the treaty we have. So if the Kurds were to officially attack Turkey, we have to defend Turkey against the Kurds. Period. Now, we try to get out of it and say, well, it was a terrorist attack. It wasn't. Because that's the real truth with all this scam. We never have Congress actually do what they're supposed to do and vote for the wars. And so I say to everyone in Congress, if you have a problem with pulling troops out of Syria, then go put your vote to it. Get your name on the record. You want us in war in Syria. Get it out there. You're worried that our supposed ally in NATO, Turkey, is going to kill our allies, the Kurds. So vote. Get it out. Put it on paper. Let everyone see. Don't leave it up to a president. What is with Congress? Do they do anything anymore? I mean, the Democrats try to impeach Trump. What do the Republicans do? Complain about Trump every once in a while. Meanwhile, when it comes to the budget or, leave the executive do it. Leave the executive do it. What has happened in the past 2-3 years? Do you recall anyone say, what exactly were the Republicans and Democrats that are so upset about Trump trying to pull out? What was their plan with the Kurds? Do you recall any of them? Were we diplomatically engaged with Turkey? Were we threatening to pull out aid from NATO unless Turkey vowed not to kill the Kurds? I don't recall any of that. I recall when Trump said, hey, we're not going to give as much money to NATO. All these same people saying, you can't do that. NATO's really important. So what's going on? It seems to me like it's just an excuse for these people to say, hey, we want to be in this never-ending war. That's what the point is. All of a sudden, now they care about the Kurds. Oh, now, yes, the same people that we've been arming and financing the Turkey, and it's always this way. None of these stories make sense. Like, for example, we had to back the rebels in Syria, right? The rebels were al-Nusra and al-Qaeda. But we had to back them against Assad because if we didn't, ISIS would get a stronghold. Does this make any sense to you? In Libya, we had to back, which basically was ISIS against Gaddafi. But in the United States, you can't go through an airport scanner without practically getting molested. You have to give up all these rights. We had to have the Patriot Act because supposedly Islamic terrorism is such a bad thing. But we have to arm the Islamic terror. It depends on these area. It depends on the country. Sometimes they're our enemy. Sometimes we have to arm them. Oh, and then they become our enemy when they cross borders. It's the same with this situation. Is Turkey our enemy or our ally? If we can't trust Turkey to not butcher and murder other people that are our allies, we should not be in an alliance with them. Period. We shouldn't be giving them money and weapons. We certainly shouldn't have their back if they're attacked. But that's where we're at. Maybe it's time to pull out of NATO. And I've said it before, the only time you could turn on Fox News and CNN and see them praising Trump at the same time, it only happened one time in this presidency. Only once. And that was when Trump bombed Syria. Finally, he was acting presidential, says the party of peace purveyors on CNN. All the Democrats, right? They protested the Iraq war. Woo, Bush lied, people died. Then Obama came in. Yeah, Obama, Nobel Peace Prize winner. Woo! I forget all the wars and stuff he did. Whatever, woo, peace, peace. Now those same people are saying, how dare Trump try to get us out of a war? How dare he? We need to stay there forever. Is there a timetable? Has Lindsey Graham given a timetable? Or Mitt Romney or any of the Democrats? Schumer's and Schiff? What's their plan? Does anyone have any clue? Now, I think strategically this is a smart move by Trump. One, it's fulfilling a campaign promise. Second, I'm always for bringing these people back. Our troops back. Third, I think it sets up a situation. I don't think Trump trusts Turkey. But anytime he tried to criticize them or NATO, he gets crapped on by our entire establishment system. And so, he says, fine, I'll pull out. Let's see what Turkey does. When they act poorly, then Trump can come back and say, see, maybe this is a reason not to be involved with the Turks. The other thing is, it outs the Democrats for what they really are. And I'll get to in my next story, just like with the NBA. They're liars. They claim to be more moral than you. They claim to be ethical. They're not. They'll jump at the chance to have never-ending regime change wars. Jump at it, as long as they are in favor of it. As soon as it can be used to smear their opponent, so be it. But Trump's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. If he stays there, the Michael Moores of the world will be, Trump's a warmonger. If he pulls out, the Michael Moores of the world will be like, how dare Trump leave our allies suffer? So it outs, furthermore, as if we needed more outing. Do you see one Democratic? I saw Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi came out and said she's upset. This is the same Tulsi, by the way, that got smeared for talking to Assad, is now upset that we're bringing troops home because the Kurds. Just quit while you're ahead, Tulsi. You used to have integrity. Now you're for impeachment. You're for never-ending wars. Please, shut up and sit down. She's actually someone who has talent and had integrity. And if she would have just waited out this election cycle or two, she probably would have stood a good chance to actually have a chance to be president, because people would have appreciated someone who's ethical and stuck to their guns. But instead, now she'll just be remembered as the deep state coup provider she was. And don't get me wrong, Tulsi. As soon as they can bite you, they will. You'll never get your chance to be president. So many people that have cheered for the intel agencies and these never-ending wars and all this crap. I'll defend them when it turns on them. Just like all the social justice, all the cancel culture, all the mob outrage. People are more than happy to be a part of it. And when you say, be careful, it'll turn on you someday. Then when it turns on them, oh, I can't believe it. It's not fair. Look at Matt Lauer. I'm sure Matt Lauer was one of the first people that would be pushing the Me Too crap. Right? Now that he's accused, he says, it was a mistake to be silent in the face of my accusation. Oh, you think? What would Matt Lauer 3 years ago say of Matt Lauer today? How dare you victim shame? Luckily, people like me who try to be consistent and put the country over the party will still be there to defend you. And that's how I feel about Tulsi and company. So, but that's my feeling on this situation. Good for Trump, though, he's not going to be perfect on it. He should pull us out of all sorts of places. He was right to want to pull us out of Afghanistan. He's right to want to pull us out of Syria. All of that's true. I'm tired of the foreign regime change wars. And if people on the left had any integrity whatsoever, they would applaud Trump for trying to do this and call out the corporate warmongers and the establishment Democrat and Republican side and their media mouthpieces. So the last thing I want to talk about is China and what you saw with the NBA, but it's not just the NBA. I didn't know this, but last year the Marriott, for example, fired an employee for having a Taiwanese flag, I believe, basically sticking up for Hong Kong. For those of you who don't know, here's the story real simple. A general manager for the Houston Rockets, a team in the NBA, put out a tweet in support of Hong Kong freedom. And this is a big deal because the Houston Rockets are the biggest team in China, and that's because they have a Hall of Famer, Yao Ming, that played for the Houston Rockets. And so that was right around the time basketball started getting big in China. And basketball is growing in China. And in addition to this, Jason Whitlock, who's a really intelligent sports writer and talk show host, talks specifically, I didn't make this connection, but it makes sense. So much money in the NBA comes from the sneaker companies, almost all of which are manufactured in China. And so there is a very strong financial relationship between the NBA and China. And so basically China got furious that one of the leaders of the premier NBA franchise for China came out and publicly spoke out against China. And so they started to basically take steps to pull support from the NBA. And the NBA kowtowed quicker than you can imagine. And now you have Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich and, James Harden, Steph Curry, right? They all come out and they're all pro-China. Woo! And I'll get to more of the NBA in a second. Then you had Blizzard that does World of Warcraft. They have a card game called Hearthstone. And one of the players that's like one of their champions is basically banned from playing the game because he supported Hong Kong. And we see this over and over. Now, it is a story about the specifics, and I'll talk about it. But what this is, as I said in my video on this, is it is indicative of social justice warriors in the first place. This basically goes to everything that we've been discussing on the issue. So I won't say area of expertise, but the area that I'm maybe most interested in with this is comedy, because I'm a huge fan of comedy. If I could have, I would have been a stand-up comedian. That would have been my goal in life. I tried it unsuccessfully, kind of, but I love stand-up. I love comedians of all persuasions. I love comics that can keep it clean. I love comics that are filthy. Like some of my favorites, like Doug Stanhope, George Carlin, Bill Hicks. Love stand-up comedy. Used to love old SNL. Love Kids in the Hall. Rodney Dangerfield, Norm Macdonald's one of my favorite. Love it, right? Comedy is bereft now. It's done. Almost all comedians. You still got Norm out there, though he had to kowtow slightly over the Me Too movement. But they're all the same. And I've told this story on my channel before, but it's worth talking about here. Norm Macdonald used to be a host on this show called Last Comic Standing. And for those of you who don't know, it's kind of like American Idol, except it's comedians. And so, you'd start off with a pile, 16 or something. Each week they eliminate one until you're down to the final one. And then they get some kind of TV show or contract. Anyways, Norm was one of the hosts, him and Roseanne Barr and someone else. And this comedian comes out on stage and he does this bit. And the bit is about, he's gay, I believe. And he's saying that he's upset with people using the Bible to condemn homosexuality. And he's like, if you're going to condemn homosexuality with your book, then I'm going to use my book, which is Harry Potter. And so basically, he comes out and he's like, Psalms, blah, 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 says, Harry Potter, chapter 3, Goblet of Fire, says blah, blah, blah. That's the whole bit. It was not funny. And so it ends and Roseanne's like, well, I thought that was really funny. And then it gets to Norm Macdonald and he's like, I didn't think it was funny at all. He's like, and it's not brave, it's cowardly. You came into a room in LA where you knew everybody bashes Christians and you bashed Christians. That's not brave. It would have been brave to come in and defend Christians. And furthermore, Harry Potter's an allegory for Christianity. And Roseanne's like, are you serious? And Norm's like, yeah, I am serious. And the point Norm's making there is incredibly important. And that is this. These people that think that they're brave, they're fighting ghosts from the 50s, right? It is not brave to agree with all of your colleagues and all the people with power. Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols, right? He came out and he said 3 years ago, in order to be punk today, you would have to be a Trump supporter. And what he means is punk was being anti-establishment. It was giving the finger to the powerful. That's what Trump supporters are today. Being against Trump, all of the powerful are in that boat. When you come out and you're like, and you're in Hollywood, for example, and you say, yeah, I hate Trump. You think that's brave? Do you think there's any risk to your career whatsoever? Any physical risk or monetary risk to you? There's none. If you're in the entertainment industry, none. If you're in Silicon Valley, none. If you're in the media, none. Now, try to be in the entertainment industry and be pro-Trump. See where that gets you. Now there's a risk. The same with the comedy world. The same with the music world. The same with the athletic world. Come out and be a vocal supporter of Trump. See where that gets you. How about in the media? How about Silicon Valley? That's brave. The same is true of all this social justice crap. Transgender bathrooms and gay rights and this and that. By the way, I'm for gay rights. I'm a Republican. I have no problem with gay marriage. I don't think that the government... I think if you have two consenting adults and they want to be married, so be it. I don't like a lot of the flamboyance being thrown in the face or trying to teach kids this in school and things like that. But I have no problem with two consenting adults at all. I don't have a problem with gay friends. Don't mind it at all. But all these are simple. These are easy cases to be made. Black Lives Matter. Yep. You think if you're in Hollywood, you think if you're in the NBA and you're for Black Lives Matter, you're taking any risk? Any at all? All the sports media are going to be like, oh, what a hero. All your fellow athletes are going to be like, finally, someone do it. But what about Kaepernick? What about him? Millions of dollars to not play football. So powerful that he could convince people that Betsy Ross flag is racist. Oh, I'm sure he's having a real tough time. All the risk comes the other way. Look up. You want to see a story blow your mind? You hear all these... stories about, free speech, right? Free speech. Here's a story I bet you never heard. Remember when Kaepernick was doing his thing and you turned on ESPN and they all said, oh, it's so brave. Finally, free speech. You should be allowed to say what you want. It's free speech. How brave, right? We support free speech. That's what ESPN, that's what all these places said. Did you ever hear this story? Ah, crap. I hate this crap. Stupid. Let's hope it comes up. Mariners suspend Steve Clevenger after tweets on Black Lives Matter. Wait, what? How can that be? Free speech. All these clubs are for free speech, remember? Mariners catcher Steve Clevenger sent out some controversial posts on social media Thursday, apparently referencing the Black Lives Matter movement and the national anthem protests and social unrest this week in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Mariners suspended Clevenger for the rest of the season. This was 2016, by the way. One man died after being injured during the Charlotte demonstrations, which occurred after a police officer fatally shot a black man. The governor of North Carolina declared a state of emergency. 2 Clevenger tweets Thursday drew much attention. In the first tweet, he apparently referenced the protests in Charlotte and a recent national anthem protest by athletes, including those in the NFL. Black people beating whites when a thug got shot holding a gun by a black officer cracks me up. Keep kneeling for the anthem. In the second tweet, he made referencing BLM and Obama. BLM is pathetic once again. Obama, you are pathetic once again. Everyone involved should be locked behind bars like animals. Huh. Wait a minute. He got suspended for that? At the same time that all the national sports media was praising Kaepernick? And praising the idea of free speech? Do you remember? Did you remember anyone on ESPN? Any Max Kellerman or Stephen A. Smith or Jamel Hill? Remember any of them speaking up for Clevenger getting suspended for a year? Oh, me neither. That's a risk. Well, you might not agree with what Clevenger said, or you might have thought it was a little crude. Trust me, athletes say worse than that all the time as far as crudeness. But that's a risk. That's the real powerful. You can't speak against their sacred cow. The general manager, or the GM from the Rockets is finding that out. You can have free speech and you say what you want, as long as you agree with them. And you think you're great, you're morally superior, you're fantastic. I got news for you. These people, 90% of them, phonies. Garbage, ridiculous, hypocrites. And I've dealt with many of them in my life. I used to deal with people, I'd go into debates that would scream at me about veganism and about how we need to protect animals. Not just in the context of the debate, but me as an individual is a bad person for eating meat. I leave the room and they're throwing rocks at a squirrel. I had people tell me about how terrible I am because I want border security and things like that. While we're doing debates in hotels that the staff are all people that barely speak English. They leave garbage for the staff to clean up. I stick around afterwards with the staff and help clean it up. Judge them by their actions, not their words. All of these people are complete hypocrites, and we know it. And it's every issue. Climate change, we fly around in private jets while we lecture you. Immigration, we live in gated communities with walls while we lecture you and say you have to accept everyone. Second defense, we have armed guards while we say you shouldn't have the right to defend yourself. Every single issue. Every single one. You know, Bernie Sanders used to be millionaires were bad. Now that he's a millionaire, now it's billionaires. What he's really trying to say is, my money is good. Anyone who has $1 more than me is unacceptable. That's what Bernie's really trying to say. Hypocrites. The NBA was the most outspoken of the four major professional leagues. They pride themselves on it. I have NBA 2K9 or 2K19. You know, the video game, and sometimes when you're playing, you hear their announcers, one of the little tidbits they'll go through is like, what do you think about the policy of the NBA allowing their players to be outspoken advocates for issues that they concern them? Oh, I think it's a great thing. It's what separates the NBA from the other, sports. It allows those people to actually be out in the community and make a difference. Sure, they celebrate it. They celebrate social justice causes. What's the NBA stance on talking about social justice in Hong Kong? Oh, that's different. Now all of a sudden, and it's the same. It's the same with Blizzard Entertainment. All of them. They're all like this. It is a lie. They're not more moral than you. The climate change protesters show up and they leave garbage everywhere. Meanwhile, what are the conservatives doing? Going to Baltimore, going to LA, cleaning up garbage. They're liars. The NBA doesn't care. And look, you can blame, but you understand where the players are coming from. They don't know. They don't know at all. Hey, you're LeBron James. You're a young up-and-coming star. You know, a freak. And let me say this in defense of professional athletes in general. It's easy to bag on them in the sense they make way too much money. But who pays it? Us morons. That's who pays it, right? And no matter what God-given talent they had to hone that by practicing. Most of these athletes, while we were out drinking on a Friday night in college and high school, were probably lifting weights or practicing or something. So I commend them for that. Now, I don't begrudge them the money they're making. I don't at all. But you're a young up-and-coming LeBron James. You're just a freak specimen. One of the most athletically gifted human beings ever born. Just his frame is unbelievable. Built to be an athlete, in any generation. And you're busting your butt and you get good at basketball and you come from probably relative poverty, And now all of a sudden you're one of the wealthiest people in the world. Well, what about issues? You have all these people that want, you should talk about this. Have you studied it? Do you know exactly what's going on? No. You have your personal anecdotal experience, but you don't know what that entails in the rest of the world. But you have a bunch of people that you all are surrounded with, and they're all telling you, Oh, the Black Lives Matter protesters. Yeah, white racist cops are just shooting unarmed black men at record pace. Well, that's not true. We could look at the statistics and see that's not the case. We could look at the facts. We could look at the studies. But that doesn't matter. And they're all against guns and the Second Amendment. But you can understand it. LeBron James, it's just like Charlie Sheen or, Tom Cruise. They're just surrounded with people that agree with them all the time. Yep. No one's challenging them. And so they spout off, and people take them like they somehow have some kind of intelligence on the matter or some deeper understanding. They don't. They just have a big microphone. That's all. But the coaches should know better. The league office should know better. Steve Kerr. For those of you who don't know, he's the coach of the Golden State Warriors. Him and Greg Popovich, who's the coach of the Spurs. All they do is bash Trump. Trump's evil. The country's evil. The country's racist. The guns are bad. Blah, 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 blah. Spouting their mouth off constantly. Well, here's your chance, Kerr. What did he have to say? He says, no one's asked me about China's, I just don't know enough about China's policies, but just like no one asked me about AR-15s killing people, in the United States. And what did Popovich say? That's real leadership, the NBA leader. That's real leadership, not like the guy we have in the White House. You disgusting loser pieces of garbage. You bash your own country because you know there's no danger in it. You bash Trump because you know there's no danger in it. But when you actually have a chance to stand up for actual human rights that could be a risk to you, that could cost you a dime, what do? You crawl like a baby. Please don't ask me the questions. I'm not sure if Mao killing 50 million of his citizens was a good or a bad thing. I haven't researched it. I'm not sure if cops using live ammunition on the protesters in Hong Kong is a good thing. I don't know. Absolute disgusting, vile, horrible, worst people, hypocrites in the world. There is, my opinion of them could not be any lower. The people at Blizzard. Like, look, if you want to be a corporation and you're just like, all I care about is the bottom line money, I don't care. That's fine. As long as you're not breaking the law. Don't be dumping your pollution in the stream or something. But if you're like, we don't care. We're not going to take a side in these social justice issues. We just don't care. Gay marriage? Don't care. Black Lives Matter? Don't care. All we care about is the dollar. Our bottom line. That's fine. But you don't get to claim that you're better than everyone else because you care about all these social justice causes. Only when it doesn't personally affect you, though. As soon as you could be brave for speaking up, as soon as you could personally be affected by speaking up, where's your bravery then? There's nothing more sad and pathetic than a bunch of people that think that they're morally superior going around sniffing their own farts, like the South Park episode shows, telling you how brave they are, and then running like a coward as soon as they have a chance to prove their bravery. It agitates me to no end. Now, if they interviewed, I don't even know. I don't watch the NBA all that much. I wish we had a team near Pittsburgh. And I do like basketball. I just don't have cable, so. But, if they interviewed Eric Spoelstra, Miami's coach, I don't know that I don't follow him much, but I don't know that I've ever heard him speak up on social justice stuff. And if they interviewed someone like that presumably hasn't spoke up on social justice issues, and they were like, what do you think about China? And he was just like, hey man, I just don't comment on that stuff. No problem. No problem with that at all. But when you put yourself out there and you say this country is racist, the president of this country is a Nazi, the Second Amendment is evil and bigoted, people that support the Second Amendment have blood in their hands. When you put yourself out there and say that, then you're in a working relationship with the Chinese government that all those issues you just talked about are worse by any objective manner. They're worse when it comes to racism. They're worse. You remember, the NBA was the same organization that took their All-Star game out of North Carolina because of the transgender bathroom policy. How many transgender bathrooms do you think there are in China? They have tens of thousands of Muslims in internment camps right now as we speak. And have been doing so for over 10 years. Where was the NBA? Working hand in hand with the Chinese government, leaps and bounds, kicking people out of their stadiums in Washington, D.C. that want to support Hong Kong. because they don't want to offend their Chinese overlords. But that's the people that are going to tell you your government sucks. Do you see how insane the world's becoming? Do you see it? Did you see the LGBT town hall where you had 2 10-year-old transgenders there? You had a transgender grab the mic and call Beto and them racist scumbags while Beto and them cheered him on. The climate change protesters that are wearing the all red marching down the street crawling. The guy, like the hippie that looks like Thor, dancing around doing an interpretive dance. Do you see what the world's becoming? I saw this in the debate community, by the way. This is why I kind of understand a little wee bit like Tom Cruise's insanity. Because Tom Cruise was someone who stood around with people that never told him, like, dude, no, you're wrong. You're stupid. And so the insanity just gets higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. That's what you're seeing in these communities. I saw it in the debate community. Because the debate community was so far left. You keep in mind, I started in 2003. Or 4. 2003, I think. It was so far left back then. Like, this is how you would, like, I'll just... And anyone who was in the debate community will laugh at me because you'll think I'm... A normal person will think this is absurd. A debate person will think this is slow. But this is what debates become. I'm just going to read something. We were ready to express great concern about giving the office how to debate cooperation investigation the United States against one among strong advocates of a robust close relationship with Ukraine cooperation such a legal matter regarding the political relation built on the foundation of respect and loyal accountable democratic institutions. For 4 years, Ukraine made significant progress in building a relationship with Moscow. That's debate. Every round. Why? How could it get like that? Well, there's a time limit. And it was so insular, you didn't have to talk to people outside the debate community. So everyone says I talk fast now, right? Like now I'm talking fast right here. Well, then you talk a little faster, then you talk a little faster, then you talk a little faster. And everyone else in the community could keep up. They train themselves to talk and listen faster. And so now if an outsider walks in, they're like, what kind of stupidity is this? This isn't debate. This isn't intellectual arguments. And everything's nuclear war. You know? Name your plan. My plan is that, we should increase... The U.S. government should, increase the amount of people on food stamps on another 100,000 people. That'll cause nuclear war. That'll collapse the economy, which causes nuclear war. Every single issue, no matter what your plan is, nuclear war. But then it got even crazier. It got even more left-wing. What are we debating? Farm subsidies. 2 people come in and simulate having gay sex with each other. They don't say a word about farm subsidies. That's debate. What does this have to do with farm subsidies? Well, if you even bring that up, you lose. You're sexist. You're a bigot. Over and over. That's what debate... You saw the insanity. Because everyone just agreed with each other. We had a team once. This is a true story. My dad had this parrot. It was a stuffed parrot he gave to me, and I gave it to my friend Dave. And you push the button on the parrot, and it swore at you. It'd be like, kiss my ass, or something like that. Except it said even more vulgar stuff than that. So we had a team that went to this tournament, and everyone was being crazy at this tournament. Just insane. Had nothing to do with the actual topics. Talking about give the land back to Indians, or playing music and rapping and stuff like this. It had nothing to do with what they were supposed to be debating. So I gave this team this parrot. And I wasn't at the tournament, but they got fed up, and they decided to be as crazy as possible. So the one partner would put a garbage can on his head and bang it with a spoon. And the other one started screaming about how Donald Rumsfeld owned the company that made aspartame, which this is true. And the Surgeon General warned that aspartame could cause cancer, and so Rumsfeld and his people had that Surgeon General let go. And then they put on a new Surgeon General who the first thing they said was, aspartame's cool. And Donald Rumsfeld made millions of dollars. So he starts ranting about that and all this Illuminati stuff while the other kid's beating his head. The point of it was nothing. It was just insanity. And then every time someone would ask him a question, they would respond by hitting this parrot that would swear at them. And they won round after round after round. Because the judges were like, I get it. It's so deep. I understand what you're saying. It's like when you go to a modern art thing and you just look at feces smeared on the wall and everyone's like, yeah, I get it. That's how insane you could become when you're surrounded by people that all agree with you. That's how academia now is proposing segregation, black-only spaces. We've come so far full circle in the name of fighting racism that our academic institutions are proposing the plans of the KKK. The KKK and the people at Ivy League schools are both in agreement that we need separate spaces for white and black people. That's what happens when you surround yourself by only people that agree with you for so long. That's why diversity is important, by the way, the diversity of thought. That one of the reasons is to make sure you don't become an insane maniac. But this is what we see now. All of these social justice, all of Hollywood, all the athletics, all of the Silicon Valley, the gaming industry, the media. It just gets crazier and crazier. 10-year-old transgenders on CNN? People, yeah. Did you have a sexual preference when you were 10 years old? I remember, when I was 10 years old, I remember we would have recess, and I just moved to a new school. And you want to know what my big thing was? Because I was kind of a newer person at the school, we were all into the X-Men. And so at recess, a bunch of the people that became my friends would be like, one would be Wolverine and one would be Cyclops. And I was always the villain. But I wasn't happy just being like Magneto or Juggernaut. I combined all their powers. So I had the power, like the strength of Juggernaut, and I had Magneto's powers over metal. You know, I combined, and I could shoot fire like Pyro could. That's what I was doing at 10. Apparently, I was way off base. I should have been making difficult long-term decisions about what my gender was and my sexual preference. And what's funny is, the way I grew up, I'm not even like, everyone that knows me, like, my left-wing friends that met me through debate or through school and things like that, they think that I'm like some redneck, which I am in a sense, but I'm a really bad one. So the people I know around me are way better at all redneck type stuff than me. And I don't say redneck as a pejorative. Where I live in rural Pennsylvania, the people I'm around are my favorite people in the world. I think that they make the world go. They make the country go. They're out there working 50, 60 hours a week with their hands, doing things like trucking and welding and farming. Things of tangible benefit to society. And they ain't rich. And they ain't complaining either. They just basically want to be left alone by the government. So I don't mean anything bad by the use of the word redneck. But I'm terrible at any working with my hands. I'm a terrible hunter. I try, but I'm no good. Terrible fisherman. I can't fix anything. All the things that you would think of makes you like a outdoorsy type person, I suck at. But that's kind of the irony. All the people back here think I'm a nerd because I read a lot and I'm into politics and things like that. But these friends I have, these left-wing friends, right? They don't understand. I think a lot of them don't, like, they don't see how insane it's becoming. The average person doesn't want this crap. They don't. The average person doesn't care what your sexual preference is. They just don't care. They just don't want it thrown in their face. That's all. They don't want 10-year-old transgenders. It's too much. And it's always like this with the left. And that's how you know, right? The Green New Deal, you think that's going to be the end of it? Like, anything. Ask any one of these people that are like crazy progressives, right? Open borders. We need to take more illegals. How many? Give me the number. What is the maximum? Reparations. We need reparations. Give me the number. What is the dollar amount? $10 trillion. Let's say we give $10 trillion, right? Does that mean any problem we have after that $10 trillion goes to whatever community you want, that we won't say, well, this is because of slavery in 2 years? Do you think that really happened? If we gave $10 trillion to the citizens of inner city Baltimore, and 5 years from now, the murder rate hadn't gone down considerably, do you think they'd say, well, it can't be slavery anymore, we gave reparations? Do you think they'd say that? Of course not. So, it's always they want more. Always. Look at the Second Amendment. And by the way, this is another good thing about the election of Donald Trump. He's forced them. Do you really think Pelosi disagrees with AOC? They disagree on the process, not on the outcome. Nancy Pelosi is every bit as radical as AOC. The difference is, Pelosi understands that you need to get there incrementally. That if you come out and spill the beans too early, people will reject it. It's the boiling frog theory. You ever so slightly turn the temperature up. You don't just jack it up like AOC did. That's why Pelosi's mad. Not that she disagrees with what Pelosi's goals are. She absolutely wants total uniparty control of every aspect of your life. That is what Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats want. Absolutely. And when we would make these claims on specific issues, we were told we were liars. Oh, you're crazy. Open borders? You think the Democrats would be for open borders? Come on. You think they would actually come and try to take your guns? Please, that would never happen. You think they'd be against the Bill of Rights? Oh, come on. Now it's open. Openly for it. Look at how radical they've came since Obama. And it's just going to get worse and worse until they lose so crushingly that they're forced to come back to sanity. But, I mean, it's that simple. Like, take guns, for example. You'd be like, listen, what is it about assault rifles that... You say we need to ban certain types of weapons. You call them assault rifles. Yes. Can you define what that is? You know, one shot, one pull. And why is it that you want to get rid of them? Well, because they can kill a lot of people. Okay, well, you know handguns are one pull, one shot, right? And they actually kill far more people than the AR-15s or anything you're talking about. So you're suggesting banning handguns? What? No, we wouldn't ban handguns. It's just the AR-15. That's just the one. It's the AR-15. And now where are they? Yeah, handguns might have to go too. Just like we knew. Open borders. We said it for years. Democrats don't care. By the way, neither do the Republicans. Anybody really run on this until Trump did? Of course not. So, it's just, you would see this insanity and this push. And people have been saying, like feminism, right? To bring this back to what we were talking about with China. Remember, we had feminism. People would ask. I saw like Jordan Peterson and others theorizing this. And I certainly, just regular people like us watching it probably said this. Okay, if you're a feminist and you're concerned about like someone catcalling you, for example, in the United States, and that's a big traumatic deal, why aren't you actually in places where women are stoned to death for adultery, like in the Islamic world? Why aren't you saying anything there? In fact, why do you have people proposing Sharia law like Linda Sarsour leading the Women's March? You don't see how that's far more controlling and demeaning and dangerous to women, their Sharia law, than the United States? But they never seem to have a problem with it. Why was it? Well, it's two things. One, it's cultural Marxism. And so you're not an individual. You're just a series of categories. And you've heard me talk about this before. I'm not Rob Knorr, an individual with actual thoughts, my own opinions. I'm white. I'm a man. I'm overweight. Straight. Born in the United States. Then you take all those categories. You're either oppressor or oppressed. That's all that matters to them. But the other dirty little secret is it's all about personal benefit. That's why, right? Let's say that a black, disabled, trans, intersex woman, man, I guess intersex wouldn't be woman or man, comes out and says, actually, I'm for the Second Amendment. Well, they have all those victim points. That means they're right. But no. Because the other thing is, in addition to all those categories, the real thing that's at the top of all that is, oh, by the way, you have to agree with us. You have to be on our side. Because if you're black and you don't, like Candace Owens or Kanye West or Ben Carson or Larry Elder or Thomas Sowell, then you're a scumbag that you're terrible. You're an Uncle Tom. Right? That's how that works. You only get your victimhood points if you agree. Then you cash them in. And what's that? What is that indicative of? It's personal power, personal benefit. That's exactly what we're seeing with this NBA and with Blizzard and Marriott in China. It is personally beneficial to them. They'll play up anything they can to make themselves get more power, more money, more influence, more prestige. All of that stuff. They have made a mathematical calculus that it is for more prestige and more power for them to bash Donald Trump, to bash the United States as racist, to bash the police force, to bash the Second Amendment. Because the people with power that they're communicating to, that they like, enjoy that. So they raise their stock when they do that. Does that mean they actually care about people being victims of gun crime? Does that mean that they actually care about racism? Does that mean that they actually care about authoritarianism? No. And how do we know that? Because when we see bigger examples of it in China, they're silent. They're more than silent, actually. They're cooperating with the Chinese government. The same with Google. The same with Facebook. But you're the problem. And don't be mistaken. China will, at current pace, overtake the United States economically. And if you're a progressive out there and you think, hey, good, America's the great Satan, it's the big evil, woo, communist China, wait and see. Wait and see what it has in store for you. You think video games are misogynist now? You think that protests are being too violently dealt with by police now? That's what you're cheering for. That's what you're supporting. But, like I've said over and over again, the truth is, as long as it's most of these people, they're only in it for personal benefit. As soon as it could personally negatively impact their wallet. If you're an NBA superstar, you're James Harden, you're selling jersey after jersey in China. Whoa! I mean, the Chinese aren't that bad. By the way, it's not impossible to deal with this properly. South Park did it. Did you see their apology? They put out this video, or they put out their episode about China. You couldn't, I mean, South Park have incredible timing. Not only are they very fast once an incident happens to turn it into a show, but they are very good at being predictive of raising an issue that then becomes a bigger issue. So they did this episode on China, and basically the whole episode is about, I haven't seen it, but I know what it's about. The whole episode is about how Hollywood basically kowtows to the Chinese and censors things and is pro-China because they make tons of money in China. And it shows the Muslim internment camps and other things like that. And then not a week after they do this, the NBA comes out and does exactly what South Park was mocking. Bows down to China. Oh, we're sorry, corporate overlord. We're sorry, our Chinese overlords. Please keep giving us money. By the way, China invests in all of this entertainment type stuff. China's investing in Hollywood and movies. China's investing in video games. China's investing in athletics. They will dominate the entertainment industry. And all of your woke Hollywood stars and, your Meryl Streeps or your athletes, your LeBron James or your singers, your Bruce Springsteens, whatever. You really think they're going to say, you know what? No, I'm not going to stand silent in this humanitarian crisis that China's committing just because I'm getting money from China. You think they're going to make that stand? You're wrong. There are benefits to authoritarianism. One of them is you don't have to worry about your people protesting you. Well, I can't say that. You don't have to worry about the people that are accepting your money protesting you. We have more of a free market system. So, the NBA can do what they want. They can criticize the U.S. China says, basically right now you have a 50-50 relationship with the NBA, with China and the U.S. So the U.S., they're not going to punish you. China says, you can't bash us, and we actively encourage you bashing the United States. Okay. Will do. Have you seen one NBA star come out? One. And say that they were disgusted by this. And look, it's not a random situation. It's not like they're saying, NBA, what do you think about Saudi Arabia? It is a country that they are actively working with, being paid by, in the country, playing games at. They're actively kicking people out of Washington Wizards game for having a free Hong Kong sign. In your country, in the United States of America, you can't support democracy in another country, else you're kicked out of a game. That's how strong China is. And they're investing heavily in our academic system. And let's not forget, going back to the first story, Guess who's got their greasy fingers all over China? The Bidens as well. But not just them. All of them. Well, that's clearly not true. Many of them in Washington. We know foreign lobbying is a huge problem. We know the Chinese government's throwing money around left and right. We know they've been ripping us off, stealing intellectual property, unfair trade agreements. Trump's been the first one to try to fight back. Why was everyone else silent? Why didn't they care? Well, let's check their bank accounts. People are going through they want Trump's tax returns because they think he might have some sort of business deal in Russia. Meanwhile, Trump's been harder on Russia than any president before him. Well, since the Cold War. Now, let's look at Dianne Feinstein's finances. She have any connections to China? Because she certainly was very favorable towards China at a time when the Chinese had a spy in her campaign. Huh. Can we see her tax returns? How about Nancy Pelosi's? How about Chuck Schumer's? How about Joe Biden's? What did Hunter Biden do to get $1.5 billion from China? China doesn't have to beat us in a war. They own us. Because we have a corrupt system that's bought and paid for by the Chinese. And then to add insult to injury, these same SOBs will tell you that they're more morally superior than you. That they care about all these things like racism and peaceful protests and all that. While at the same time not saying a word about the Chinese that are paying them and what they're doing. It's absolutely disgusting. They literally have contempt for you if you're the average American. I don't care if you're right or left wing. They don't care about you at all. They think that if you speak up and think that the government should be looking at you and looking at people like you and looking at the citizens of this country and actually working for them, they think that you're a hindrance. They want you to shut your mouth. That's what they want. Just shut up, pay your taxes, and leave them alone. Leave them become corrupt and rich. Leave your country be sold out. Leave globalism take over. If you care about this country, if you love this country, if you're a patriot or you're a nationalist, then you're a racist scumbag. Shut up. You're a bad person. There's always someone out there that's more of a victim than you, that deserves more than you. You didn't do anything to achieve in your life yourself. You owe everything you have to the government. Those Hollywood celebrities are better than you. They're fine to be working with the Chinese. The Chinese are better than you. The Chinese government's better than you. You suck. Shut your mouth. You're just a peon. You're deplorable. You're 10-toothed. And I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. That's how they feel. They don't care. Sure, they'll talk a big game. But the moment you disagree with them, or the moment it could cost them 1 cent, all of a sudden they don't give a shit about you. At all. And I'm sick and tired of it. I think all of us should be. Where's my politician? Where are the Republicans I vote for? Have I seen them on TV? Fighting against this coup? Talking about what's going on in China and all this situation? Nope. It's unbelievably frustrating. But don't worry, they'll all be Johnny-come-latelys as soon as public opinion's enough to sway them. Mark my words, at some point, take NBA for example, at some point this year NBA will come out and be like, well, we were unaware of exactly what was going on in China, and we do think that, we aren't in support of authoritarian practices there. But that's after they're groveling right now to the Chinese, like, please, we have to say something. We're afraid we'll lose our clout in the United States. We're still really with you, trust us. We really are. We're really with you, but please leave us issue some statement without punishing us. Oh, great lords. Please. That's what's coming down the pipe. Don't worry. Meanwhile, Russia, Ukraine, right? That's all we care about. Who cares that overdoses are at record high? Who cares that people are struggling to pay their bills? Who cares that veterans don't have health care? Who cares that the border's open? It's insulting. If you won't, again, it's like the boiling The only reason you're not out of your mind furious right now is because you're living in it. If you were outside of it looking at it, you would be like, how can people put up with this? The corruption, it's unbelievable. It was and is the biggest issue to vote on. Again. That's why I voted for Trump. That's why if it was Bernie versus Jeb Bush, I'd have voted for Bernie. You think I'm a socialist? You think I'm a progressive? Of course not. But Bernie seemed like he was an outsider. Now, he's tried to sell his soul and get back in with them now, but sorry, Bernie, never going to work. Once an outsider, always an outsider. There's always that sliver of chance maybe you wouldn't want to go to some foreign war that they want. So, hit the bricks. Don't worry, though. Elizabeth Warren came in to steal your thunder. She could be trusted to go to war when necessary. I voted for Trump to out this corruption. Now we're seeing it in our face. He can't do it alone. And yes, there are a lot of people like me, regular people out there, that are trying to support him. And yes, that doesn't mean I won't criticize. I criticized him when he bombed Syria. I was told by Trump supporters, I sold out. I was a secret Democrat. I'm not someone who's a cult of personality that's going to support Trump no matter what. That's not who I am. I support the idea of draining the swamp and ending this corruption. And Trump's not perfect, but he's doing better than any president before him. And he's dealing with way more of that corruption than any president before him. Where are the Republican allies? I see Lindsey Graham. He'll go on Fox and say, we're going to get to the bottom of this. This is just unacceptable. And we'll get to the bottom of it. Where are the subpoenas? For God's sakes, the IG criminally referred Comey and McCabe. Where are their arrests? Where's Barr on that? And I'm told by Trump supporters, it's okay, it's okay. It's not okay. Where's my congressman on TV? What do we got, 6, 7 that are willing to speak up in defense of Trump? Lee Zeldin, Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows? Lindsey Graham sometimes, but he doesn't really do anything with it. Devin Nunes, can't forget him. And I'm sure there's a couple I'm forgetting. What good are these people if we're putting them in office when they can't speak up against a coup? They're silent. They're all just seeing which way the political winds blow. The most important thing to them is to keep their freaking jobs, isn't it? So you don't want to pick a side yet. Let's see who will win, and then we'll jump on it. I ran for Congress, by the way, for District 12 of Pennsylvania. And if I'd have won, I'd have been on TV every day, on CNN, on Fox, being interviewed in the New York Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, ABC. I wouldn't have cared. Every single one of these shows. I would have probably been a little more dignified and yelled a little less. But maybe not. It is enough to infuriate you. Why is it up to me? You don't think that I don't make a dime. My YouTube channel isn't even monetized. I work 70 hours a week. So do most of the people that watches this. Why are we more informed than the people whose jobs it is to do something about it? And you could almost deal with it if it wasn't for the smugness and the arrogance of the establishment people. If it wasn't for that little smile on Peter Strzok's face, or for the arrogance of Mueller to just have them repeat everything knowing he didn't help write his report at all. You could almost deal with it if it wasn't for that crap. But, yeah, that's where we are. So, anyways, that's all I got for today. I gotta leave before I get too upset. I'm actually gonna have a nice, what is today, Saturday? Yeah, a nice Saturday, so I think we might be carving pumpkins later. So, thank you everyone for listening. I do really appreciate it. I know it was bad this week putting out videos. I am going to try to start doing them daily. I just got really busy with work. There was some weird stuff going on at work, so please forgive me for that. So, yeah, I will be putting videos out as the week goes by, so please share those. Follow me on Twitter at NorRobert on Twitter, and at BitChute in case YouTube ever shuts me down. I would really appreciate that as well. And I'm at Robert Nor on BitChute. So thank you, everyone, and please share my stuff. And we'll talk to you all soon. Have a good one.